Going?
Yep, all set.
Okay, so let's get underway. My name is Paul Goldstein. I am chair of the Waterfront Parks and Cultural Committee of Community Board 1, and I welcome everyone to our meeting this evening. With us are just a couple of people I'll introduce from the committee. Andrew Zelter is our co-chair of this committee. And Diana Sweetai is Director of Planning and Land Use. She will also give us lots of assistance tonight. Okay, we have a fairly long agenda, so let's try to get going and try to move along as best we can. Okay, item number one, we're very pleased to have with us is Jack Klinger, one of the attendees. He is president and CEO of the Museum of Jewish Heritage located in Battery Park City. And I believe he and his colleague, who can introduce himself, will be updating us on how the museum is going and what's going on there. So with that, let me throw it over to who's the representative from the museum that's going to speak first?
We have Jack and Joshua, I just assigned you screen share. So if you're ready to share something, you should be
at the end. I wanted to share a video, a 2-minute video with you.
Great.
Okay, so if Jack is with us, why don't you join in and introduce yourself and give us any kind of report that you have.
Jack, just so you know, you're on mute.
Yes.
Jack, I'm going to unmute you if that helps. Oh, I think you just got it. Hi, Jack, are you there?
Yes, Diana, thank
Perfect.
you. I think I am unmuted. Does that work all right?
Yes, you're unmuted and we see you. Thank you.
That's even better. First of all, let me thank you, Paul and Diana, for the invitation. It's my pleasure with my colleague Joshua Mack, head of marketing communications for the museum, to be able to give you an update to CV1 about our institution and what we've been doing and where we're heading and how we think we're going to get there. First, let me just say that for those of you who do not know the institution too well, we are now coming up on our 24th year in operation. In 2022, we'll celebrate our 25th anniversary. Our museum is dedicated. The full title is the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. We are the New York institution that is dedicated to the remembrance and education about the Holocaust. We are the third largest Holocaust museum in the world and the largest independent Holocaust museum, as the two other large ones, Yad Vashem and the Museum of U.S. HMM in Washington, are both government-owned entities. We are independent. And our mission is dedicated, as I said, to remembrance and education. And we believe that our mission has never been more important than it is today, to teach the lessons of history, learn from the lessons of history, and see not only what hate did, but what hate can do. As you can imagine, the past year has been difficult for us as we battled both the effects of the COVID epidemic, and we were effectively closed for 180 days to the public coming to the institution physically. And when we reopened in September on a partial basis, we were coming back. But we've also had some incidents, as you might know, that shortly after the January 6th events in Washington on January 8th, we had a hate crime incident at the museum where members of the Proud Boys planted a Confederate flag in our front door and took photos of themselves giving a Nazi salute in front of the railroad car and published that on the web. What was very encouraging to us was the outpouring of support we got from the community, from officials in the police department and from the school right across the street, but from our neighbors, Battery Park City, who were most supportive and most anxious to show their support. So as I've said, we have had a difficult period, but during that period of closure, we were able actually to pivot and go aggressively onto an effort to go beyond the walls of the museum and really push forward our digital and virtual footprint through programs, through virtual tours, and through virtual educational programs in combination with our schools and our teachers. In a normal year, our museum would have roughly 200,000 visitors, comprised of both adults as well as student groups. Students are our most important target. Education is among our most important missions. And in a normal year, we would have 60,000 students pass through the institution to see the lessons of history and also be taught about hate and being not just a bystander, but an upstander. During the past year, as we did close the institution because of COVID and pivoted into a more digital footprint, we got very aggressive on creating programs, virtual teaching tours, teaching tools and virtual tours. I'm very pleased to say that in the past year, we have had over 200,000 virtual visitors to the institution, a broader group demographically as well as geographically than we ever had before. As we go forward into the future, we plan to continue with our digital efforts, our virtual efforts, but we will reopen physically as we have since September and become more aggressive in that posture. So what we say is we're going to be in the future a combination of both physical and digital communication and contact with our members, our audience, and our community. The existing exhibition that we had starting in May of 2019, which will close in May of 2021, was the very well-received Auschwitz exhibition not long ago, not far away. That exhibition will be deinstalled in May, and then we'll go on to other locations. And during this past year, we have been planning for our new core exhibition, which will open in September of this year. And that will be focused on fighting anti-Semitism, the history of the Holocaust, and even how to deal with these issues of hate in the modern day of today. Following the opening of that new exhibition in the fall of this year, it'll open in September. In the following year, next year in 22, we will open our first children's exhibition targeting 9 to 12-year-olds, which is a very important effort on our part, and that will open in September of 22. 2022 will always also be our 25th anniversary year. So we've got a lot of things going on at the museum. We continue to attract not only new audience online, but more and more physical visitors over the past 4 months. And we continue to see more and more visitorship going on. We're open right now 3 days a week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And we expect to continue with that. And hopefully as things develop, we can possibly look at more than that. What I want to do is hand over the microphone to my colleague, Joshua Mack, who will give you a rundown of the kind of things we've been doing in terms of our digital footprint, as well as the plans we have for our theater, the Edmund J. Safra Hall, which is located in the museum and which is going through a renovation that will make it possible to do even more exciting things going forward. So I will hand it to Josh. He will take a couple of minutes to describe and then hand it back to me, and hopefully we will be done in our allotted 15 minutes. Josh?
Thank you, Jack. So, as Jack said, when COVID started, we pivoted to virtual programming. And I just wanted to give you a few highlights. Often our programs are Holocaust specific, but they also move beyond its legacy. So last April, for instance, we had a program beyond social distancing, understanding discrimination during the coronavirus pandemic. Um, our state Senator Yulin New was part of that. Amos Patalnik, there's a large trial about white supremacy going on in Charleston next October. And then Stephen Smith, the executive director of the USC Shoah Center, were there, and we covered, sadly, in a very timely manner, violence against Asian Americans that had come up because of. We also had more recently Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. He was talking about his family's legacy in Thessaloniki. They're Jews. Thessaloniki, the Jewish population was pretty much wiped out during the Holocaust. We've had Isabel Wilkerson, the author of Caste, in conversation with Rabbi Angela Buchtal from Central Synagogue. And for that, just to share the kind of numbers, we had 3,800 people register for that program. We had 2,500 people watching it simultaneously. We've had Daniel Liebskind talking about his career and his legacy. And so that's virtual. And then, as Jack said, we're switching, reawakening live programming. Our theater, which I hope that some of you may have seen Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish or had other reasons to be there over the past years, has just undergone a major renovation. We've put in new lighting, new sound, installation of cameras, new carpeting. The seating is being reupholstered as we speak. Starting in June, we will be using that theater to show movies, do some concerts, do family programming Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. We're also going to kick off all of this with 3 outdoor concerts sponsored with BPCA funding on June 10th, June 24th, and June 11th in Wagner Park. And I'll share more details about that. So we have sort of this hybrid model ahead of us, virtual and live, and then occasionally virtual and live coming together. And I hope that we become more of a cultural center downtown. I think our new theater has been it's got stellar facilities to be partnered with other groups and to be a place for people to come. So I'll turn it back to Jack now.
Thank you, Josh. I'm going to close with 2 items that I'd like you to be aware of. One is just an update, and the other will be a video segment from something we did recently. An update, first, we have a group of Holocaust survivors who have become members of our Speakers Bureau, 36 Holocaust survivors in the New York metro area who speak to school groups, who speak to teachers, and who speak to adult groups about their experiences. As you can expect, Holocaust survivors today were teenagers during the Holocaust, so they have an ability to really touch and connect with students, high school students today. When COVID started and people were isolated, we made a specific effort to make these Holocaust survivors able to communicate digitally, and we trained each and every one of them to be able to use digital communications, whether on their mobile phone or to be able to use iPads for Zoom. If they didn't have an iPad, we provided them for them, and I'm very proud to say that every one of our speakers, our 36 Holocaust Survivor Speakers Bureau members, are now Zoom trained and are on Zoom calls all the time, including calls to various members of their family here and around the world. So we feel very good about having done that. Finally, on April 11th, we did our annual gathering of remembrance, the day where one remembers the 6 million who were killed, as well as those who survived. In Israel, they take 2 minutes of silence. Here, we usually have a gathering at the Temple Emmanuel, but this year, as last year, we did it virtually with an hour-long program. We were able to get an impressive array of speakers, including Senator Charles Schumer, Alicia Wiesel, the son of Elie Wiesel, as well as many other dignitaries. One of the people we got to speak was Douglas Emhoff, the husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, and what we'll call the second gentleman. And he recorded a segment for us, which I think we'd like to share as our closing for this presentation. Josh, is it possible for you to play it?
Josh, you're muted. I don't know who could unmute you.
Thank you. I will unmute myself and share it.
Thank you.
Can you screen share it, Josh?
Yes.
All our friends from New York City and across the United States, the state of Israel, and around the world, greetings. To Jack Kleiger, Rita Lerner, Ann Oster, and the Museum of Jewish Heritage, thank you. This museum is a testament to memory, a site where survivors' voices are lifted and students' eyes are open to the dangers of evil unchecked. It's a place of defiant celebration of the Jewish people and a living monument to the human spirit. And it is fitting that the Museum of Jewish Heritage brought us together from Yom HaShoah. This is a day for remembrance and reflection. Today, we remember the 6 million Jews and millions more who were brutally murdered by the Nazis during the Holocaust. Today, we reflect on the staggering toll to families, to communities, to entire nations of this most heinous chapter in our history. This most sacred day is also about resilience. The resilience passed down from great-grandparent to grandparent, to parent to child. The resilience that defines the Jewish people, who I am so proud to call my people. The survivors of the Shoah endured the worst of humanity, and yet they embodied the best of it. Many of them came here to America to start families, build businesses, and create community. Because of their perseverance, as well as the many Jewish immigrants who came to this country before them, we now live in a nation where Jewish people lead in the boardroom, courtroom, the State House, and yes, even the White House. We owe these survivors everything. But we owe them especially this, to never forget. We must speak out against bigotry and prejudice wherever we encounter it. We must speak out in the face of anti-Semitism, in the face of xenophobia, homophobia, and Islamophobia, in the face of anti-Asian violence, systemic racism, and white supremacy. We must speak out. To borrow from the diary of Anne Frank, how wonderful is it that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world? Her words ring with resilience, the same unbreakable spirit that defines us now. So let us reflect and remember today. Let us start to improve the world tomorrow. May that be our tribute. May that be our legacy. Thank you.
So let me thank Paul and Diana and all the members of CB1 for hosting us to give this presentation. And we appreciate your time and hope you have a very good meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack Kliger, Joshua Mack. You gave a great report. You do very important work and we appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Good luck this year. I do see that one committee member has her hand raised for a comment. Elizabeth, do you want to?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for your presentation, Jack and Josh. Two questions. The first is just a quick question about the cattle car in front of the museum. Is that going to stay there on a more permanent basis, or does that leave once the Auschwitz exhibit ends?
So the railroad car is part of the Auschwitz exhibit, and it will be leaving when we deinstall. Actually, the date of the railroad car being deinstalled will be May 16th.
Okay, all right, great. And the second question is, Josh had mentioned about efforts to sort of, combine with community, other partners, whatever, to share the space or to use the space. I don't, he had mentioned that in passing. And I just wanted sort of to, get a little more explicit on that. What were you sort of, what did you mean exactly by that? Maybe I'm sort of misquoting you. I heard kind of a comment that you mentioned that.
No, that's a great. So as you know, right now, the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene is in residence at the museum.
Right.
They do productions that take up between 30 and 40% of the theater's availability. We also have various concerts and other things, but we are talking to and looking and very open to having other groups look into renting our theater, and we have nonprofit rates. Our interest is in bringing people into the museum and having them discover the museum. So if, for instance, there may be a different theater production in October coming in, not just the Folksbiene. So I think over time, as people begin to discover our facility, during COVID, part of the renovation was in the hopes of having people use it as a production studio without live. We did several live concerts that we streamed out. We have these amazing cameras that can capture video and stream it out. So began looking to we hosted New York Yiddish Fest in December, and I hope to do that again. And so working with other groups like that is something that very much over time, I believe that over time, like the Schimmel Center and like Skirball at NYU, I think we have possibilities. We have some challenges to groups. We're not open Friday nights, and we're not really open Saturday at all. So, but I hope that people do talk to me about the possibility about using our theater and frankly, our other facilities. We have an events hall that seats 400 people.
Are you open Saturday nights or not?
We can be open Saturday night. It is complicated in terms of the expenses for security and so forth.
Okay.
It is easier as we work with our hours for the fall. It is a lot easier and less expensive for people to work with us when we are open. But traditionally, we've always had events there on evenings when we're closed. So there are ways to do it. And yes, we can do Saturday night performances.
Yeah. I can answer that we can open on Saturday night after sundown. It is something we would have to set up, but we've had many weddings and bar mitzvahs on Saturday nights there. So yeah, we are able to do that. But our overriding point is that we have a state-of-the-art theatrical facility. We've just gone through a major renovation thanks to a grant from the Safra Foundation. And it is one of the finest production and theatrical spaces in the downtown area. And we plan to be as aggressive as possible as working not only in presenting programming, but working with the community on how to do as much as possible.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hope to be in touch.
Thanks very much.
Did I see one more person from the public who wants to speak? Well, I see now Alice has a question. Alice Blank, co-chair of the board. Why don't you go? Unmute yourself, Alice.
Oh, great. I was unable to come. I'm sorry I'm late, Paul, and all. So okay. So I just want to make sure, did the museum folks get a chance to describe how the effects of the Battery Park City Authority resiliency plans will affect you, and if you have any thoughts to share on that?
Sure.
And if you did, I'm sorry if you're repeating it.
No. By all means, I'm fully familiar with the resiliency plan. We were taken through the presentation recently, and we know all about what the stages of the plan are, and we're very excited. We don't see any problem with it other than we're just having to redo our security cameras, which is part of the plan. But we're very excited about it. We think it'll not only be obviously a necessary and long-range planning move, but we think it will enhance not only the physical beauty of the area, but with the major improvements of Wagner Park and all the new plantings, we think that it will make the area even more inviting as such. So we're fully on board with it. We have had it reviewed with all of the key members of our board and institution, and we know that it's supposed to start sometimes before the end of 2021, and we think it'll be fine and good. We have the physical layout of how it will be laid out next to the perimeter of the museum, and we've had our engineers looking at it, our operations people. As far as we're concerned, it's all good to go.
Thanks so much. It's good to hear that you're supportive of it. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, we do have a few more. We'll try to get through 2-3 more people and then move to the next item. Kathy Gupta.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. As you may know, this September is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And I wondered if there was any observance being planned or joint programming with the 9/11 Museum, or even, I think in the past year.
We are definitely willing and interested in doing something on September 11th. The problem for us this year is the dates of the Jewish holidays, which come very early. I think, I believe Rosh Hashanah is either September 6th or 8th, and then comes Yom Kippur. But within that limitation, we would be glad. I think we've done some observances of that before, and so we have not yet been in touch with the 9/11 Museum. The other problem for us is this year, September 11th is on a Saturday, and our laws call for us to be closed on Shabbat. So between the Saturdays and the high holidays, we'll probably do something, but I don't know that it'll necessarily be on September 11th. And we'll do something commemoratively without a question. But we have some zigs and zags we have to do, particularly this year.
And I would just say I've been discussing it with my senior programs producer. I think that we tend to think about programs in the context of either the Holocaust or the legacy of the Holocaust. And so one of the things we will do some programming. We will obviously observe it, and you'll hear more about that. But yes.
Thank you.
Francis Curtis.
Hi, I have a couple of questions, and I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You do catering, you do events for the capacity for 400 people. Was that a number?
Yeah, normally we can accommodate 400 people in the days in these days of social distancing and space requirements. Right. We are reopening our event space to accommodate up to about 120, about 25% capacity. And yes, we do have catering within the institution. It's kosher, but that's, but the point of it all is that it's a very high quality. We have an on-premises restaurant named Locks that is a catering facility as well. So yes, we are capable of doing all of that. And I can attest to that personally, since my daughter was married at the museum.
Okay, and the catering includes liquor, alcoholic beverages, or
correct.
So you have
we have a license for that.
A license attached to the catering service. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we also have it's good to get the word out. We also have smaller spaces in the museum that are lovely spaces, all of which look out on the Statue of Liberty generally. Smaller space that seats 80, and then the cafe itself. And we tend to, back before COVID, we would do a lot of meetings weddings, bar
Yeah,
mitzvahs.
we had corporate events as well.
And I'm trying to work with the Downtown Alliance, frankly, to get that more known.
Get you listed. Okay, yeah, that's good to
Yeah,
know. I mean, I
yeah,
had no idea that you guys.
exactly.
And
I've
Exactly.
been in your auditorium for meetings, but I didn't know that the facility was
I can
able
tell
to
you, we have the
accommodate
best
so many.
smoked salmon in town.
We do, actually.
I guarantee you that.
Can I go
It's
in and
really
just buy
good.
some?
Totally
Yeah.
true.
And it's very healthy
Okay.
too.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're welcome to come by and sample. Just let us know and we'll be glad to give you a sampling.
Well, I
Okay.
think I have to pay for it.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Okay, the final two people who would like to make comments or questions are Taylor Banning first.
I think Taylor's question was not on this item, but Taylor, I'm going to unmute you in case you have a question on this item.
My question was about the additional agenda item that was added last minute. Sorry, I can wait,
Okay.
I guess.
So
So
we'll
I'll
come
get
back
to
when we
you
get to
then.
that item. And let me find Therese here. All right, go ahead, Therese.
Hello there. I have a question either for Jack or Joshua. In terms of your relationship with the National Yiddish Theater Folksbiene, will they get any preference in booking Safra Hall, or do you have a contract with them, or how will that work since you're going out and trying to get other people in there as well?
Josh, you want to take that or you want to?
Sure. So they have, we're working through a process where they present their plans for the coming year. And I know their productions right now, the earliest they'll be in the theater would be in January. And then they have two productions. So I would say that they get most favored nation status. We work with them, but they don't get to, it's a planning process. And as I look to programming, I have to accommodate them, our own programming, but I really would like the theater, as I understand it, Jack was explaining to me that they originally came in to, because one, it's a perfect match in many ways, but the theater was underused. And we were maybe using it 30% of the time. And so as we grow into and evolve into what I hope is the downtown location, we can begin working with other partners as well. And
I'd like to add something to that. Part of our renovation of the theater is to reposition the curtain into such a location that even when the Folksbiene does performances, we'll be able, even when they have a set, to have the curtain drawn and still do other programming like events or presentations while they're in performance with their schedule. So
yes,
that will not be mutually exclusive.
that's hugely important. Yeah, we're going to have a mid curtain, and that will enable us, even when they're there, to have classes, meetings. We can facilitate all of that.
That sounds good. I just wanted to say that Folksbiene has brought a lot of interest to the museum, with the great success of Fiddler and some of the other wonderful programs they put on. And it would be a shame if they decided to go anywhere else. I want to stay there.
That's not even implied. They're wonderful, wonderful partners. And we hope many, many years of success.
Quite frankly, we have they will start up again in January, but we have two dynamite programs that they are planning for both January and March. And I think they'll be really very impactful. But no, they're not going anywhere. If anything, we're even more engaged.
That's great news. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, let me then again thank you, Jack Klieger and Joshua Mack, for coming to our meeting. You gave very good information. We're happy to have you. Hopefully we could have you again as the months go by to see how things are going. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, committee, let's keep moving. Item number 2, South Street Seaport Museum history and funding. So we go from one cultural institution to another. This is a report prepared by the Seaport Coalition and Save Our Seaport, and they are going to talk about how the museum has sort of been mistreated by the city and not received the funding that they thought they were promised. And they are going to identify alternate funding sources for the museum. The two lead authors who are going to take us through this presentation are Sandy Ames and Jay Hellstrom. And I believe you're both longtime volunteers at the Seaport Museum. Is that correct?
It certainly is.
All right. So why don't you go ahead and continue introducing yourself and walk us through the presentation.
All right.
Sandy,
Paul.
you start.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you also to the committee for letting us speak before you tonight, and thank you also to Diana for putting up with our many versions of various documents we've sent to you.
Anytime.
So look, first an introduction. Look, I'm Sandy Eames. I'm an earnest museum volunteer and member for 20 years now, and I've put in a lot of hours into this wonderful institution. And let me just welcome a couple of words from my colleague Jay Hellstrom.
I share those sentiments as far as the opportunity to be here, and Diana, thank you again. We're newbies, so to speak. We live in the historic district. We're very excited to be here, a volunteer, and anxious to continue the history and the flexibility of the museum and the Seaport for many, many years.
Okay. But look, but now we find ourselves as two frustrated museum supporters objecting to a funding plan for the museum that does major damage to the historic district and may not be that successful in supporting the museum long term. And our presentation this evening covers two key items. It's a brief review of the long history of how the museum's funding has been progressively undermined by what we consider one-sided leases by the EDC in conjunction with Howard Hughes and its predecessors. And we also like to propose an alternative approach that diverts existing cash flows from the historic district back to the historic district, and especially in the museum, without having to renegotiate those leases. And we also have two recommendations for your consideration at the end. So let me turn over to Jay now to talk about as best he can, to summarize 50 years of history into a few minutes as to, how we got here. So over to you, Jay.
Thanks, Sandy. I will try to be brief, but it is a very long history. It has its ups and downs, and then we're certainly at an inflection point. So I think it's helpful to have some of this background. The South Street Seaport District was created back in the 70s, with stated goals to preserve a historic district by establishing an area of historic buildings and open space as an urban retreat, to permit transfer of development air rights outside the district to other designated sites.
Okay, Jay, may I just interrupt and request Diana go to the second slide? There we go.
Yeah, if you'll do sorry, Diana. And third, to support and assure that the museum receives revenue from the city-owned or controlled properties within the historic district. Slide 3. Whittling away of the museum's revenues through the years is a story of 1,000 cuts, and I certainly mean that. It started in '73, back when the era of the city and the bank foreclosure on the properties that the museum had assembled. It continues all the way through to a 1981 lease with developer Rouse, who never made a dime, and as a result, nothing went to the museum. In 2003, General Growth Properties, now HHC, assumed the assets of Ralph. And then it was more the same as we continued from 08 through 2012. The museum forfeited Pier 15 and was restricted to then 300 square feet on Pier 16. Howard Hughes was given an amended long-term lease for the Seaport properties, and they were also given veto power over the museum's ability to sublet its extra space and options on any museum space left vacant for 6 months. The museum forfeited the John Street lot to the city for unpaid rent and to repay trustees' loans at that time. From 2011 to 2013, the Museum of the City of New York managed the museum. In our opinion, that was a period of substantial growth and great achievement. However, in 2013, the Museum of New York pulled out. Why? There are many reasons, detailed in a letter from the CEO to the museum board of trustees, but here are a few. One, EDC and Howard Hughes refused to modify lease terms, thus preventing the museum from realizing revenue from unused space. And to quote Susan Henshaw Jones, quote, with the old 1981 lease in place, the museum is effectively straitjacketed. Then the year of the disaster lease in 2003 is upon us. The city, in a private meeting with the museum not invited, turned control of the Seaport's multiple public assets over to the Howard Hughes in a 60-year lease with provisions favorable to HHC and extremely detrimental to the museum. They also received options for the Tin, the New Market, and museum buildings. And instead of providing for a dependable revenue stream, the new lease relieved Howard Hughes of obligations to fund the museum, allowing them to take over vacant museum space and limit the museum to upper floors. This also inhibits the possible free market value of the taxed publicly owned air rights. And HHC also reserved a first look on the sale of the John Street lot as well. It's also around this time that the city audit unearthed a unpaid city taxes by HHC, and they refused to pay what they owed. They also refused to lease ground space on Front and John Street in violation of their lease. And in 2017, Howard Hughes continued to solidify its control through 3 private amendments to their lease, exercising options over space in the museum block, Hermisher Row, the museum annex, and others. So here is the sad but honest conclusion. We all know the museum has very large expenses with its ships and several buildings. HHC in the city has starved the museum for decades by pocketing income from the piers and HHC's leased sites rather than providing an ongoing revenue stream for the museum as originally envisioned. Howard Hughes accumulated and sold air rights on properties first held by the museum as they assembled their Project 80 South Street development, and sold that for a after-tax profit of $183 million. $183 million, a lost profit to the museum and the district that instead went to Texas. And further, the city is the museum's landlord, but has not supported its inclusion into the cultural institution group's auspices and with all its benefits that could be inured to the museum. Sandy?
Okay, next slide, please, Diana. I thought the pullout by the Museum of City of New York was a major eye-opener. I thought it was because of, Superstorm, not me. But no, it was actually the leases and the inflexibility by EDC and HHC and being willing to change things so the museum could actually rent out its unused space and realize some income. Anyway, so here's a thought for an alternative plan. And it really encompasses a new principle. And it's actually a very simple principle. And the principle is that the revenues and asset sales from the historic district should be returned to the historic district, and in particular, the museum. And the first step in that will be to restore operating funding to the museum. So the EDC receives ground rent from Howard Hughes under some of the piers, like Pier 17 and 18, tin building ground leases. There's also docking fees for the hornblower boats, and there may be other various fees and rents from other sources. So our suggestion here is that we don't try the thorny topic of negotiating changes to existing leases. What we do is the ask is that the EDC turns this revenue from the historic district over to the historic district, and particularly the museum. Next slide, please, Diana. Second one is to create a museum reserve fund. And we hope we can generate maybe 15 to 30 million from the sale of city-owned air rights. And how? Well, there's up to 250,000 square feet of air rights, which are still fully controlled by the city and are separate from the block separately earmarked for Howard Hughes. So there's about 212,000 square feet from the Newmarket site and another 45,000 square feet that can be sold for use outside, not inside the district, and monetized for the museum. And remember that the city, not Howard Hughes, owns the other large block of air rights, 415,000 square feet from the Tin Building and Pier 17. And our feeling is, look, these public assets should not be given away to a developer, but instead, these city-owned resources should be sold outside the district with proceeds to the museum and perhaps the rest of the historic district. Next slide, please. Third, the museum is sitting on about 12.5 million of unspent FEMA grant, which are untouched to date. And again, the request is let's make use of it before this grant expires. We also assume the museum is applying for federal program grants under COVID and other rescue programs. There may be new programs coming down from the federal government. And honestly, if they haven't, they're remiss. Although my experience is they've been on top of previous grants and donations before. And lastly, let's rebalance the public-private equation. And let's start by inclusion into the cultural institutions group. And this is a special group of museums that get preferential treatment. And Community Board 1 has supported this since September 2019, and we need to revisit this. And the timing here, look, short term, and this could be 6 to 12 months, divert the revenues from the ground rents and activate the FEMA funding. Medium term, selling outright, that could be 9 to 18 months. And then the longer term, we will need to, for the museum to recover or make use of the John Street lot development, which you've seen proposed in landmarks presentations. That lease will need to be clarified with EDC and funding for development put in place. So next slide, please. So how to gain support? So look, there's a number of objections we've heard. And I think firstly, one of our asks is that we ask Community Board 1 to form a task force in conjunction with the museum to develop alternative approaches. And the honest answer, there has been very little communication. And when there are problems and differences of opinion, the best thing to do is talk, and that's not happened. Second issue is, how do we go about getting EDC to hand over those revenues? And look, what's going on in 2 months' time, there's going to be some very important elections coming up. And already some of the up and coming candidates are speaking out in support of protection of the historic district and along the lines that we maybe thought. And we also have, look, a new mayor being elected. And maybe the EDC will have to be overruled to divert these funds. But we have the opportunity to speak to a new mayor who can do that. Second issue has been no receiving sites for air rights. So one of the things I saw last year was an offer in writing from a property development company, YZK Development, which was made in April 2020. I didn't see it for much later. And this was a simple offer to our elected officials, and they were seeking to buy 270,000 square feet of air rights and willing to pay $125 per square foot. So this offer was worth in the region of 34 million. And although discussions took place, it was largely ignored by elected officials. And this, well, you can see, this is obviously a lost opportunity. And as I say, the current plan being promoted by the museum in conjunction with Howard Hughes is not supported by outgoing electeds. But again, we have changes in, we have new candidates coming in. So part of our role is to reach out to new candidates. Next slide, please.
So where are we now? Thanks, Sandy. So the question is, where are we now? You know, it's the big bet. We're involved in the big bet. Howard Hughes wants to buy from the city the extra city-owned air rights it needs for the mega tower at 250 Water. EDC is left to decide how much of those funds pass to the museum. Howard Hughes has never planned to donate those funds to the museum, as a startling but true fact. They've mentioned $50 million, but as this process has worked its way through the second chapter of that we've been in with regards to landmarks, that could be down now as low as 25 million. So to emphasize, next slide, please. To emphasize, here are more of the facts. No money is changing hands between HHC and the museum. The city-owned air rights are for use outside the district, not 250 Water, anywhere else inside the district. For the good of all New Yorkers, the public air rights should be sold to the highest bidder at public auction for the use outside the district, and not necessarily in any sense to HHC. It's to the highest bidder. Money from the sale should be used for its original purpose when the museum was set up. And that's for the museum. And the sale of the air rights that we're discussing here is the same mechanism we have been proposing all along. Our plan just eliminates HHC as being the middleman. Sandy?
Okay, next slide, please. So look, money's there to save both the museum and the historic district. We don't see this as an either or situation. And look, you know, the museum should get the money it deserves from the city, and it's been deprived for years. And we don't think its survival should be dependent upon. It's an ephemeral upside. It's really a bribe, you know, to the community, not to an individual, but it's to the community, from a private developer who actively helped the city starve the museum in the first place. And we got a vague promise. As far as we know, there's nothing in writing to deal with any of this 50 million so-called donation. But there's only really a vague promise that serves really to divorce the museum from the seaport community it was entrusted to preserve. And I think that one of the things I see is from all of the presentations to landmarks, we saw how much the community loves this museum. And but the problem with the proposed solution is it's divided the community into two quite opposed and maybe bitterly opposed camps. I'm also of the mind now that we may be entering into a lose-lose situation, where the community may be losing control of the historic district, and a grossly oversized development will be built on 250 Water. Nothing wrong with building it to the approved zoning height of 120 feet, but the latest proposal was 3 times that. But second, the money being raised for the museum is diminishing from what was originally asked for, and 25 million will certainly help the museum, but it won't provide the long-term financial future that the original 50 million. And that was, by the way, was the minimum requirement. They were originally looking for much more than that. 50 would help in terms of an endowment. 25 really doesn't do it. So next slide, please, Diana. There's also bigger consequences, and there's really dangerous precedents here for the landmarks preservation. So one is approving an unusually large building inside a historic district. The second one is the issue of transfer of air rights within a historic district. And then the third one is this approving a zoning change in return for, as I've said, effectively a bribe paid to the community. And these 3 precedents invite other similar challenges, perhaps backed up by lawsuits. Well, you did it at 250 Water, why not in Brooklyn Heights, in other historic districts? So we need to be really cautious about how we proceed with this. And then we've talked about the alternative, which is why can't the cities simply sell the air rights outside the district to fund the museum? And we feel the community is being played. Next one, please, Diana. Anyway, so our recommendations here are really 2-part. I think you can tell we're angry at the way the museum has been treated. And a lot of volunteer time has gone into flushing out in many, many hundreds of pages of documents what this true history is of the treatment of the museum by the EDC. And so we're asking for a resolution which expresses criticism of the EDC, and at least putting that criticism on record. And then secondly, as I mentioned before, no communication is not a solution here. And I think a resolution to set up a task force to invite the museum to sit down and discuss its future with its many, many supporters in an attempt to bring us all back together. And next one, I think, last one. Please, Diana. So we've put together a number of supporting documents to expand on this. And these, Diana's been kind enough to put these in a Google Drive, which you can access. I'm not going to read these, but there is an excellent book, which you're going to have to buy, and he'll love you for that, by James Lindgren.
Mine.
There's the letter from Museum of City of New York resigning from managing the museum. There was an interesting study on the study of the effectiveness of public-private partnerships done in February 2020, and the writer speaks to the imbalance that's taken place down at our seaport area. And then there's the alternative funding mechanism that we proposed. There's an article called "The Tale of Grand Dreams, Sad Failures and Unkempt Promises," and again, that's about the history. And there's another one called what we call the squeeze play, where we feel the museum is being used as a pawn in this whole thing. There's also a letter from Comptroller Stringer from the EDC, which gives further information on the disposition of the various air rights above the piers in particular. So that's it, and Jay and I are open for questions.
Well, we got one treat to show you how fragile our district is. So if
yes.
Diana,
One moment, I just got to switch here to the right window.
So one of our group found a flyover of the historic district. And if we can get this up, thanks to Diana, we'll show you. It's only 30 seconds long. But it really shows how the historic district nestles down amongst the surrounding tall buildings.
All right. Can
And
you
we're
see
coming
that
in.
here?
Okay. There we are. So we're flying in basically over the Brooklyn Bridge going east, and you'll see Water Street appearing just past this tall building. And now we're looking down at the historic district. And you can see a parking lot, and that's 250 Water. So if you put 30 stories on that, you can imagine the impact on the rest of the historic district. That parking lot is part of the historic district. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you. Okay, committee, anyone have any questions or comments before we take a look at the proposed resolution on this item? Okay, I don't see any.
Yes.
I do.
Who's that?
Alice.
Oh, okay.
Just
I
a quick one. Can you, that's a great presentation. Thanks so much. Could you just, I don't know if you mentioned it, but could you just talk about where the museum board and John Bull, where it sort of comes down on any of this? Could you sort of, is that a discussion you've had in this presentation? You know, I recognize, you know, obviously there's two sides here, but can you just give us a little bit on that?
Well, I think, look, the last communication we've had with them has been over a year ago, maybe even 18 months ago. And that's why I'm speaking to the lack of communication. We have shared some of these plans in the media, and the answer back is that the alternative plan is not a workable plan. But I think the museum and its management are still strongly in support of the plan they've been talking about in total with Howard Hughes.
So let me add further to that. It's very difficult in this environment not to have a two-way conversation. And I, with more of a financial background, you know, went in and tried to get a much better handle on the financial flexibility, or, you know, there's an awful lot of rhetoric about how this museum is under, you know, extreme financial. The last 990, which is a product of not-for-profit, is almost 4 years ago. I tried diligently to get more information so we could be more up to speed, if you will. And the one that should have been filed was simply a blank check. So this has been very frustrating, I think, for some of us who want to do and try to advance the flexibility of the museum. So I share in Sandy's frustration, because you can't do this without having the proper transparency, if you will. So I don't know whether that's an answer, but maybe indirectly it might be.
Well, so it sounds like you've certainly attempted as a group to have met with museum many times, and that you're falling on, your proposal is falling on, has always fallen on deaf ears and continues to do so. Is that fair to say? Or,
yes.
Yes, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, I don't know. It's we have had this communication, but a while back, and I think it needs to be restored. And I think looking back at the difference, you have a large group of people for the museum and for this plan, but for the support of the museum, speaking at the landmarks presentations, and then another group speaking against this plan, but also many of whom support the museum. And we are in two camps right now. And I think communication together and coming together maybe with an alternative plan or a plan B or something different, I think could well be a very worthwhile thing to do.
yeah, I would agree. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, let's go in order that I saw people raising their hands. Richard Coleman.
Yes, thanks, Paul. Great presentation. It's thank you both, Jay and Sandy. Really outrageous misuse of the public trust, it seems to me. And I wanted to ask a similar question that Alice asked, only in terms of the elected officials. And first start with the Controller's Office, since they seem to have been aware of some of this and participated in some of these communications. But in terms of elected officials, what conversations have been held and what's been the response?
Let's see, I may want to
or the
reach out.
candidates as well.
Yeah, I may want to reach out to one of my colleagues for a more, I mean, there have been communications. And again, the elected officials, some are in one direction and some are in others. Let's see, is Michael Kramer available to speak? Maybe he could just speak to some of the conversations that we've had.
Thank you, Sandy. I guess we can divide it up into a couple of different conversations. With Gail Brewer and the Manhattan Borough President's Office, it's been an ongoing conversation since at least 2014 in the Seaport Working Groups. We've met many times with Matthew Washington and with Gail, and we are very disappointed in the response we got. And we talked about using the air rights outside of the district, and really was just given lip service. The community board brought that developer to Gail and to Margaret, and at that time, Gail and Margaret did nothing with it. We've also had conversations with Anthony Drummond, who's the land use person for Margaret, and that went nowhere about the air rights. We've gone through at least 4 different land use people with Gail, and that has also gone nowhere as well.
Just quickly, Michael, when you say nowhere, just what exactly does that mean?
A dead end.
Is an offer for an air right? Wouldn't they have an obligation to pursue it?
They wouldn't. They actually, we asked them to introduce the developer to EDC, and that was a problem as well. So the point is, it's been a dead end.
Okay.
And what about the Controller's Office?
Controller's Office has helped us to codify the air rights, who owns what, how many. They got EDC to respond to that. Through the Controller's Office, we reached out to EDC and asked for a meeting, and they refused to meet with us. This is as recently as about 6 weeks ago. Also, we finally got a document dump from a form application with EDC where they gave us 1,800 pages. And what we found out was that, they've been working on this at least since 2018, which is the documents that we got, but probably even before that. And some of the things that we found were really very troubling. One of which was that the museum was being asked to simplify its real estate holdings, and effectively that's going to reduce the amount of real estate from 83,000 square feet in real estate assets down to 27,100 square feet of real estate assets. And we only found this out by doing a FOIL. So all these conversations have been taking place not only without the community board's input, not only against the guidelines and principles of the Seaport Working Group, but with no input from citizens.
Yeah, thanks, all of you. Thanks, Michael.
And you need to unmute, Roger.
Let's see. I'm trying to find Roger here. He just messaged me. I'm hearing feedback. I know others are hearing it too. Just a reminder to mute your line if you're not speaking so we can reduce feedback. And let me see if I can find Roger here. Here we go. Roger, are you on?
calling in on 212.
Roger, if you have two lines going, could you mute one of them? There's a lot of feedback coming off from your end when we unmute you.
Don't unmute me on.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
We love Zoom. Yes. Oh, this isn't even Zoom. Okay. WebEx.
Roger, are you there? I unmuted the dial-in users. Are you one of them?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My apologies. I'm having WebEx problems tonight. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for Sandy and Jay's presentation here. It's a travesty that those of us that have been involved in the community board as long as people like Paul and I for 20-odd years are at this point. A couple of things. One comment and an observation. I would suggest, Sandy, Jay, that you add the Seaport Working Group principles to your list of references. That group of 60-plus people met for 3 or 4 years and came out with some very, very clear principles that Howard Hughes participated in and is now completely reneging on everything that they committed to then. Secondly, I think there was a turning point when many of us in the community, myself included, could see these meetings were going on behind closed doors. I remember going to one of the fundraisers for the Seaport Museum on one of the big ships. One year it was all good fun, everyone was friendly with the community board. The next year we were getting the cold shoulder. So these backroom deals have been going on, in my opinion, for quite some time, and it's despicable given these are public assets and some of the most important ones in our community. I personally feel that we need not just to force the community board to, or ask the community board to set up a task force, and Alice, I hope you will support that. I think we have to get back into meetings with EDC. When I was more involved 3 or 4 years ago, we would have meetings with EDC, and they would confirm all the notional agreements that Howard Hughes claimed were fact. And I think we've got to really force EDC into acknowledging that Howard Hughes may have options over a lot of these assets, but has not paid anything for them. And I think that we should also go to the press, if we can get any press to listen to us, and point out that these backroom deals between EDC, a property developer-friendly mayor, and this one organization is not what should be happening to public assets. I remember standing up when General Growth said that they were going to do great things in the Seaport, Pier 17, and I said, well, where is your funding for this? And I will never forget, they scoffed at me and said, we're a big property developer, Mr. Barham, you don't need to worry about that. 7 weeks later, they went into liquidation. I also feel that, frankly, Howard Hughes and their supporter, Dan Ackman, are in a similar precarious position. So I think we must push, but I agree with Sandy and Jay, we've got to bring Jonathan and everybody else from the museum back onto our side and understand that there are other alternatives. Thank you, Paul.
Roger, if I can just jump in, I think thank you for your comments. I think yeah, I will find a way to include the Seaport Working Group and its findings in our presentation and in the support documents. And thank you also for pointing out that, and for Michael, by the way, that our elected officials and the museum signed on to agree with and follow the Seaport Working Group guidelines. And those are and that sign-on has basically been thrown out the window.
Yes, that is true. Okay, let's keep going. Tammy Meltzer.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for the great presentation. I'm going to put in the chat, I asked Diana to share the 990 information for the South Street Seaport Museum Foundation, which is available online from ProPublica. So that's in the chat if you want to take a look at that. And I think the sad thing from a chair's perspective is to know that there are many people who want to save the Seaport Museum, and that Howard Hughes has been driving a wedge between the communities, all looking to support the museum, but also looking to support the historic district. So any kind of funding that we can do to coordinate to help the museum is great. I am concerned that this will be at the loss still of the Seaport District. I love the aerial, so I would love to submit the aerial footage actually to LPC because it so clearly shows how small and how important the historic district is. So thank you. And if we can find a way to support the museum, help them get to their goals, maybe we can even get them expanded. But clearly this history shows us that one developer is not the savior for the seaport. Only by diversification will we have long-term success. Which, you know, the determination of insanity is trying the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you. Okay, let's see, who else do we have? David Sheldon.
Hello. I wanted to come back to the question about the museum's position. Not that I have a fly on that wall, but when they say this is unworkable, it may well be because the EDC has told them they don't want to do it. It seems to me, reading all this documentation, and again, being a Seaport volunteer for 20 years, that the EDC is driving the bus. And, you know, Howard Hughes is sitting in the front seat, and the museum gets to tag along. This is also being revealed in some of the FOIL documents that basically the museum is submitting its budget to Howard Hughes. The point being is that when the museum says this is not workable, it's because the EDC is saying we don't want to do it. I don't have a fly on that wall, but that's how it looks to me. I do want to ask concretely how the board might want to go about reestablishing some liaison with the museum and seeing how that might be developed into something of a working arrangement. I don't know how the board would choose to do that, but I do hope some kind of outreach and some sort of tentative sit down on a, you know, informal basis is reached.
I don't, speaking on behalf of the board, David, I'm responding to tell you that's not a problem. We can certainly talk to the museum. We can talk to Jonathan. He is a valued member of our community, so that's not going to be a problem.
Okay, excellent. And if anything I can do to help, let me know.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, good. Moving along, Andrew Zelter.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks to our guest for a great presentation, very detailed. And this may be a bit granular, but I'm curious. There was representation of unclaimed FEMA money to the tune of about $12.5 million. Is that a verified number, and do we have any public position or understanding as to if that money's available, why it is sitting unclaimed by the museum?
I think, Andrew, I think it's a good question. I think given the information and the lack of communication we've had with the museum, the honest answer is we don't know. We don't know how much remains unspent and the reasons for that. I also understand there are some constraints on the use of FEMA funding. For example, one of the constraints I believe applies is that the damage has to be put back as it was. You cannot use it for building improvements. And then, just give you an aside, I remember working up on the 5th floor of Schermerhorn Row, varnishing Pioneer's hatches. That was my winter project, which I did for several years, in the unoccupied executive offices. And those, it's probably about 20,000 square feet. So it could easily be a $400,000 or $500,000 annual rental. So why was that space sitting up there unused? And I could go varnish my hatches up there. Well, it plays back, I think, to these leases.
Is that a euphemism?
And the elevator which accesses that space was knocked out. You restore the elevator, you now make the space available, and therefore, per the lease, it gets transferred over to Howard Hughes.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've gone through the board members who wanted to speak. The other people I have are not board members, so let me start calling on them. Louis Kleinman.
Hey, Sandy and Jay, great presentation. I assume that you'll be putting out a request for volunteers to push this project of yours forward. I don't know what platform you're using, but I guess you could use SOS in order to get everybody on board. So that would be a good idea. I did put a question into the chat, but disregard it because I think my question is subject to negotiation. You are, of course, as you noted, at an inflection point now because of the mayor's and the various elected races. And I really hope that everybody gets some talking points so that they can participate in all of these various town hall meetings that all of these guys are doing, letting them know exactly what the problem is and trying to get their commitment to do what you want to do. So in any event, please let us know how we can help you in the future.
Louis, thank you so much for that. That's a real nice word of support. I think we have to have the communication with the museum because at the moment the museum supporters are split into two camps. I think go back to David's point about how do we influence the EDC? Well, who does the EDC report to? It reports up to the mayor. And that's maybe where we have to go if we're going to activate an alternative plan. Yeah, I mean, there's a limit to what we can do as a small volunteer organization, but thank you for your support.
And I think it's urgent that you consider going through the campaigns because now's the time to do it, not
Exactly.
Not 2 months from now.
Exactly.
And just to echo that, we've had good support from some of the locals. We just need to leverage, and we're discussing trying to get groups together to do exactly that. We can put it on record.
Okay. A few more. Linda Roche.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on, right?
You're on now. Go.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to speak in support of the resolution, obviously. And it's been known that from the inception of the Rouse HHC takeover of the Seaport Historic District, that they have been in back office talks with the city to make deals. In fact, many deals that were not in the best interest of the historic Seaport, and especially not in the best interest of the Seaport Museum. Yet politics wins and the community loses. And just going back to our elected officials, they're supporting HHC for their own interests. Gail wants museum funding, and Margaret wants affordable housing, and the museum needs money. So when do we as a community stand up and say enough is enough and not let our community or our neighborhood be turned into a real estate monopoly, and it's going to destroy our heritage? So there are ways to help the museum, which we all want, through the means put forward by this resolution. So I'm hoping the community board agrees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Emily Hellstrom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks for the presentation. I guess I should say that it is my dad who made the presentation, so thank you. But I just want to say that I find it very troubling that throughout our city that we are giving up public assets, public land, and these are not open, transparent transactions, and it's happening in lots and lots of different places. And I think sometimes it gets really tough because, there are competing that we do want affordable housing and we do want, funding for our public assets like museums. But I think that, this is not something that is being done by, out in the open. This is now land that, basically in one document, it's showing that thousands of square feet, tens of thousands of square feet is all of a sudden going to a private developer because of a lease that public, the public was not aware of. So I find it very, very troubling. And I feel like, when we say something like heritage and sometimes museum and history, a lot of times it's like whose history and whose heritage. But I think that, with the unrest that we've seen this last summer, and a new vision of what that museum could be and what our public land is and what we are owed as a community, I think that we could really forge something incredible. So I hope that our elected officials start listening to people on the ground and not doing backroom transactions. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Therese?
Hello there. I have no way of getting myself heard unless you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's great. I know you don't want to mess with the leases, but listening to everybody, some of the things that have been expressed are things I've been thinking about too. Public assets have been by EDC given away to Howard Hughes by virtue of these leases. And my question is, are they legal? I mean, is it really legal to do that? And it may be necessary to try to fight it back down to that level, because if you don't, you're just going to come up again like, oh, fix the elevator and then Howard Hughes gets the fifth floor, or that kind of stuff, because of by virtue of these old backroom leases. So question, are they legal? Can anything be done to fight them? And I'm not just talking about the ones that have been mentioned here. I mean, Howard Hughes got Pier 17, I think, at $3 a square foot or something like that. It was some very low number, when other spaces in the South Street Seaport area were going for several $100s a square foot. It's one thing after another.
Teresa, I think your question is a really good one. There's a practical issue though, which is if the CEO of the Museum of the City of New York ran up hard against a thick brick wall in addressing this exact issue, it's going to be a much bigger wall for us to climb as a small volunteer organization. But legal challenges are something I think we should be looking at. There may be legal options here. Many of these lease amendments were made without the museum's involvement, and yet the museum was directly impacted by this, and that may be one opportunity. But I'm not a lawyer, so but I would love for that dream to be true.
Well, there are lawyers who are very interested in the South Street Seaport District and the museum. Maybe some of them could be gotten to look at this issue and see if there's any possibility of contesting these leases.
Yes, we're in touch with a few. It's remember the size and thickness of the brick wall.
Well, heck, I mean, the thing is, looking at this from where we're sitting right now, first of all, you got a time crunch because of what's happening at 250 Water Street. And second of all, everything that you've said could be absolutely 100% true. But if you run up against those leases again, it doesn't matter, in my opinion. And it's been one backroom deal after another. I love Roger's phrase. That's a great one. Yeah, it's in secret, no museum at the table. There's something really stinky about that. I would think that somebody could find a way of contesting it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Therese.
Right.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay, another speaker we haven't heard from, Stacy Shub.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was very well put together and very reasonable. I just wanted to point out that two things that popped up to me are some things that sort of almost get glossed over, which is one is how Howard Hughes assembled property on South Street utilizing our assets to flip a building in a real estate transaction and make over $180 million. And they also have created a site with air rights that could be as tall as the World Trade Center as of right. Where's the money for the museum from there? Where, that money just went out of the district at our expense. The other one is the whole scheme that you guys are talking about with the $50 million is not exactly coming out of Howard Hughes's pocket. They're just a middleman. So again, there's so many different things from leases to this to that. But those just are two that are so egregious. I'm just surprised that no one else is really talking about how they've already taken so much out of the district already. Thank you.
Okay, can I suggest that in light of the length of our agenda and the fact that it seems that the overwhelming number of speakers are sort of in agreement with what they've heard tonight, can we take a look at the resolution and see if we could get that taken care of so we can keep going? Okay, so I don't know how many members of the committee have read this resolution. It seems to jive very much with the presentation that you heard. Do you want me to read it? Or can you read it yourselves?
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Okay, so take a look.
Can we see the resolution conclusions, please?
Sure. I think you have to go up a little bit, or whoever's controlling the screen.
All right, give me 1 sec. I'm going to take it out of full screen so it'll maybe be a little more fluid.
Okay.
Here we go.
You almost have it.
Is that big enough for people to read?
I think so.
Not really, Diana.
Oh,
Okay, let's see.
take it back. Okay, there you go.
Okay,
That's terrific. Thank you.
sure.
There's one typo, it's 432,000 square feet.
Okay, we'll correct that and see it further resolved.
Paul, this is Rosa. I had a question, if I may.
Okay.
On the whereas regarding the FOIL documents obtained by the coalition, it said about simplifying museum holdings. So just so that I am clear on what's going on, basically the museum owns the rights to these properties and those rights are being reduced and the area that they hold will be reduced. And then what happens? Is that like a sale? Is that a transfer? Is that, how does that exchange work of the square footage?
Michael, you want to try that?
So we learned at the Landmarks Commission that part of the phase 1, they call it, for the museum is to reorganize the space. And that reorganization, they lose all of those square feet. Once they lose the square feet, Howard Hughes's lease allows them to take it over if the museum hasn't used it for 6 months. So Howard Hughes would acquire that space and they would get it at the same rate that they spend for the rest of the uplands, which is $3.50 per square foot.
The museum is currently leasing that, and so what they're losing is their option to lease it. Is that correct then?
The museum controls those spaces, and the museum is willing to give those spaces up.
In exchange for?
Sarah Jessica Parker's entrance.
Which is how many square feet?
It's something like 14,000 or something. So it's a quite a net reduction. They're reducing their footprint by 1/2 or 2/3.
That is until they get to move into their new building, which they don't have.
Right, which
not
they do not
nice.
own.
Well, we don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to understand logistically, like how that works and how the exchange happens and whether it's equitable. So they would be exchanging a variety of different square footages in different locations to consolidate the square footage on a prime street corner, which one might argue has more value in a dollar per square foot sense, but slightly less square footage. Well,
That
more
is
than
correct. And when we asked the museum why not monetize spaces that you don't know what to do with, they would rather give them back to the city.
Okay. Well, then that actually segues into something else and I apologize because I am new to the history of the Seaport Museum and the financial issues related to it and why it is in the current position that it is in. But to a total newcomer, it seems that basically there are a lot of financial hurdles that have built up over time, and they have not been able to manage the financial resources that they have, or perhaps they have never had sufficient financial resources to begin with, so they have constantly been running at a deficit. Let's say that we're assuming that we are able to get them stabilized, in the near term. How do we know that they will be able to manage their finances in the future so they're not in the same position 25 or 50 years forward from that? Or is that like a totally obscene, like stupid question? I don't know. But the issue seems so complicated to somebody who's just new to it, with the EDC and all the different developers that were involved in the past. But it seems like the Seaport was owed money somehow from the Seaport District. The Seaport Museum was owed money from the Seaport District somehow in some convoluted, complicated way. And pieces kept getting taken away from them. Is that a correct read of the situation? But how could pieces get taken away without their consent unless they mismanaged? Or was it a mismanagement issue, or was it an economy issue?
I think that the proper answer is all of the above. And the very, very short answer is starting in 1981, the activities of the commercial leaseholder were supposed to subsidize the operations of the museum from their profits. And the Rouse Corporation hired some Hollywood accountants, and they never made a profit. So the museum never got any money. And when the museum didn't get money, they fell behind on their rent. And when they fell behind on their rent, they started giving back properties to the city. And then we had 9/11, and then we had Sandy, and there was much mismanagement at various points of the museum's history. But the future is what we're looking for, and the future of having a steady revenues, a steady source of income by diverting the money that Howard Hughes pays for their rent to the city, instead of it going to the city treasury and just getting lost there. Going to the museum would give them the steady flow that they could use to finance and to plan their operations and to fundraise. Because everybody who has given money to the museum before now wonders, will there actually be a museum? They want to see somebody come up with money first. So it's a never-ending cycle, unfortunately. But with our plan that gives them short-term relief, that allows them to do the repairs that are necessary to open up their galleries again, and then gives them an opportunity to create a reserve fund or an endowment by the sale of the air rights, they should then be stabilized to do a capital campaign to get the space to build a building at the John Street site somewhere in the future. But we at the moment, we refer to it as the imaginary building.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
all
Paul,
right.
could I recommend a friendly amendment, please?
Sure.
I think the first, therefore, be resolved. I think we should strengthen that. Say Manhattan Community Board 1 is entirely committed to finding a solution for the long-term funding of the South Street Seaport Museum, and encourages the museum and its board to work proactively and collaboratively with the community to find that solution. And then at the end of the therefore be resolved, I would suggest that we end with, be therefore resolved that Manhattan, that the museum is encouraged to look at ways of using the FEMA granted money in ways to find a bridge to its long-term funding solution. Thank you.
I think those are excellent. Thanks, Roger.
Yeah, I like those. I think, any objections anywhere? Okay, thank you, Roger.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
so with that, are we ready to call this question?
Can we still ask a question?
Sure.
Well, thank you, Paul. It occurs to me that with all the money that's going to come in from Washington for infrastructure buildup, et cetera, it might be a good thing also to approach both Albany and the city council to support the museum directly in the event that none of this other material works out. I don't see why we should keep the ask just within the district itself and the venue holders and the property holders of the district.
I believe that some outreach is being done to some elected officials to try to see
But
if,
I would put that as part of the resolution, in fact, that additional efforts be given to approach Albany and to approach the city council to secure direct funding.
all right, we urge that all that available funding through COVID and other packages of state and federal relief be specifically targeted towards the museum.
Yeah, very good winging it, Paul. I like that.
Okay, is that also okay with all? Okay. Are we ready to call the question at this stage?
Yes.
All right, anyone second? All right, I'll second. Okay, so Diana, you take the call. Do you have to do a roll call?
I get the sense that there's good general support here. So we have 11 out of 14 members present. I'm going to call for any objecting, recusing, or abstaining. So are there any in objection? Any recused? Any abstaining? Okay, it's unanimous, 11 in favor.
Thank you, and we'll make those changes for the full board.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jay and Sandy. And
Paul, now let me ask my final thing, which I didn't think should go into the resolution, which is, to whom will this resolution go? I urge that it go to all of the present officials, both in Albany and in the city, as well as prospective candidates for all of the various positions.
Does that sound okay to the leadership?
The problem with that is they're all busy trying to get reelected.
Yeah, exactly. And we are voters.
All right, I think it's pretty standard for us to send it around to the electeds. So,
right.
But also to the campaigns as well.
All right, we could recommend that. Okay, I'm going to try to move it along because I
Right.
know
Thank,
there are a lot
thank
of
you all.
speakers.
Thanks to the committee for hearing out our frustrations and for your support.
No, well, thank you very much. You did a lot of.
Chair, I thank you also.
Yes, thank you, Jay. Okay, next. Heritage Trail wayfinding markers. This is a design commission application. And here's another name I could mess up. Diana Prado and Natalie Armstrong from the Alliance. If I mispronounce your names, I apologize. And you can introduce yourselves properly and start with your presentation on what's before us.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul. I'm Taina Prado from the Downtown Alliance. And as you mentioned, I'm joined by Natalie Armstrong. She's our manager of public spaces and streetscape. Natalie's going to share her screen and share some slides that I will she and I will talk a little bit about as we run through this presentation. So we're here tonight to present our Wayfinding and Heritage Trail Marker project. I want to start a little bit with some history. Next, Natalie, on the slide. Great. So I wanted to start a little bit of with a little bit of history. This project consists of two parts: the Heritage Trail markers and the smaller wayfinding plaques and columns along Broadway. Firstly, the Heritage Trail markers, as you can see here, were erected in the mid-90s with the Heritage Trails New York, which was a public history project that was affiliated, not with the Alliance, it was a separate project, separate program. In 2000, the Alliance took over the maintenance and responsibility of these markers from the city DOT to avoid the markers being removed. The markers serve two purposes, as a wayfinding platform with the maps, and also provide historical information. I mean, at that time in 2000, the markers were in serious jeopardy of being removed, and the Alliance leadership thought it was very important to do our best to try to keep them, because we felt they were an important piece of the neighborhood's history and fought for the city, many times with the respective agencies over a few administrations to keep them. At that time, there were 39 Heritage Trail markers, and the city started to slowly install their own wayfinding signage. Several of the markers were removed at their discretion. So in the end, we are talking about 26 markers that are currently up in the bid. Secondly, we're talking also about wayfinding plaques and orientation columns. These are part of the Alliance's 2004 district-wide wayfinding system that has been up and around the district, for a very long time. I'm sure many of you have seen these. And in 2014, we agreed again. DOT was working towards creating more of a unified wayfinding system across the city, and we agreed to remove our own signage in other parts of the district. But we're allowed to keep a few of them along Broadway, and that was a larger number. But for right now, we have 20 that remain along Broadway. And I want to emphasize, for this specific project, DOT is the agency liaison for this, and will be submitting the application to PDC in our behalf. I'm not sure if somebody from DOT is here tonight. I was told they may send a representative, but I just wanted to make sure we point that out to you. Next. So when I say, Heritage Trail markers and, orientation columns, this is what I'm talking about. We go from the orientation columns on the left that, I'm sure you have seen them at different locations along Broadway. The wayfinding plaques, again, at different places along the neighborhood. And of course, the Heritage Trail markers. These are two-sided panels, with one side having historical content on it with some images, and the other side having a wayfinding map. This map is one that DOT requires that we use their own map. We used to have our map up, but they wanted to create a uniform system, as I mentioned earlier, and the maps are ones that they provide to us. Next. So here are here's an image. This is the map of our bid district, the red line that sort of marks our bid. And then within the map, these are the locations that include the replacement of a total of 46 elements. This is what this project proposal includes. 26 of them, as I stated earlier, are the heritage trail markers. 15 of them are the wayfinding plaques that run along Broadway from BC to State, and then 5 orientation columns that run along Broadway from Wall to Bowling Green. I wanted to point out that in terms of the heritage trail markers, these are placed in the original locations determined by the Heritage Trail New York project from the 90s. And once that project ended, the city took over and dictated where the markers were allowed to remain in the district, in the city. To name a few, some of the locations, we're talking about Wall Street. There's one for the African Burial Ground, Foley Square, Francis Tavern, the Seaport, John Street Methodist Church, Hanover Square, the Battery, and U.S. Customs House. And as for the 15 and 5 orientation columns, the 20 that remain are, some of those examples are, as you saw from the image, Fulton Center, Bowling Green, Trinity Church, the sort of, oh, sorry, that's my puppy. Sort of the examples I shared before, the ones that are along Broadway. Next, I'm going to let Natalie sort of move on to the next slides.
Absolutely. As Tina mentioned, these markers are over 25 years old and thus have deteriorated and are showing significant signs of wear. They are iron signs. They've rusted significantly. The bases generally show the most erosion. And in these cases, the photos you see here, they led to instability and removal. Also, the maps and historical information are currently applied with a sticker decal. As you can imagine, these are susceptible to peeling off and are constantly being replaced and maintained and checked on. That photo there shows this. So the Alliance maintains over 1,300 pieces of street furniture or infrastructure assets in our district. And given the condition of these, we think it's time to take care of them and make them better and more attractive. If we don't take action and replace these signs, they will continue to deteriorate. And now I'll show you the new proposed engineer-approved heritage trail marker design. The structure is based on the original, and we wanted to keep the same look and feel as our original signs. They maintain a historic visual, and they're recognizable because they've been in the neighborhood for over 25 years. So some improvements do include that they are modular. They have the ability to replace the base so that as they become possibly damaged or show signs of wear, we could replace the base and not replace the entire sign. That goes the same for the top finials and the laminated panels. The laminated panels are getting an improvement as well. They will now be printed on a professional high pressure laminate material that is graffiti resistant, much easier to maintain, and will not peel off.
So yes, thank you. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Natalie. So next we sort of want to talk about the content on the markers. As part of this application process with the Public Design Commission, we are required to hire an engineer and a historian to review and approve all of the information that currently exists on the existing panels. So, we decided to, take it a step further. So we decided to work with a historian who also works with the museum to have access to its full range of experts to work on the project. So there's a team effort sort of working on the content. The lead historian is an internationally recognized expert in architecture and of social history in New York City, and who the museum that we're affiliated with for this project is Museum of City of New York, which was mentioned earlier in the presentation as well. As many of you know, the Museum of the City of New York sets a very high bar for inclusive history by presenting underrepresented histories of New York City through its exhibits and projects. So, for example, if you see on this slide, the update for 40 Wall Street is an example of one of the markers, one of the boards that would be updated. The historian, this is one that she has added new language from the original to include information about the actual original wall at 40 Wall Street, that was built by slaves when the city was called New Amsterdam. So this is just one example of areas where the content would be updated and added to make it more inclusive. We're also going to change some of the images, possibly. The older images and the existing ones weren't as good a quality. Some of them have high, pixels, as they tell me. And so we're going to also use some of the images to take some of them out and select ones that will look better over time on the panels. Our goal with this is to ensure that the panels represent, of course, a more inclusive history of Lower Manhattan. Natalie?
It's already here. And these are our new proposed design for the wayfinding plaques. As we mentioned earlier, these exist along Broadway. There's 15 of them. As you can see, the new design is very similar to the old, and it ties together a unified visual identity throughout the district. Similarly, the orientation columns, also very similar to the original design and would match the same aesthetic as our other signage. The eye is very visible and acts as an information icon to all viewers.
Thanks, Natalie. So in terms of next steps, this, between the heritage trail markers, the plaques, and the orientation columns, that is sort of the gist, or the bulk of what we are submitting to PDC. We plan to submit our application to PDC next month, wherein we would present the proposal to the PDC Commission in June, and hopefully be able to get approval for that application and be able to begin installing the new stanchions and the new plaques and orientation columns later this fall. We think this is sort of a really good tie-in as people start to return to the district, whether it's for work or residents coming back because school's back in session. We think this is sort of part of an overall initiative we are working towards to welcome people back to the neighborhood, and taking this opportunity to do it now with the street infrastructure that we're talking about today. So, obviously we're happy to take questions from the committee and from whoever. We would be seeking, as part of the application, we would be seeking a resolution in support of this application, and sort of are here to sort of answer any questions people may have.
Okay, thank you, Taina and Natalie, for that presentation. And we will indeed start taking comments from the committee first and then from the public. Let's see, on the committee, do I see any hands raised? I do not. So let me move on to the public.
Paul,
Wait,
Rose and I are here.
I do see a couple now. Okay. So
just when I thought I was
start.
out, Paul. Just when I thought I was good, questions came. I'm just joking.
Well, their hands went up a little later than I saw, but in any event, they're here now. All right, let's start with Alice.
Thanks for the presentation. Can I ask how, who else besides, is GCP involved in this? Is it, I guess, how is the design done? What designers are you working with? Who else is involved in the decision making in this process besides the one historian at the Museum of the City of New York?
You mean the design of the actual physical components?
Yes.
Right. So the heritage trail markers and the heritage trail markers, I guess, is a separate, not a separate, but it's a different infrastructure piece, because it was the one that was originally, erected from the 90s, and then we took ownership over it because nobody would, right? The city didn't want to. We didn't want we didn't want the markers to go sort of to be removed. So we decided that we wanted to take over the maintenance and the responsibility of them. So the marker, where the marker looks now was what was erected in the 90s, that the Alliance was not part of that process. We've tried to, so we ourselves have, and Natalie can also talk a little bit more, but hired a fabricator, a designer, an engineer to design a stanchion very close, and you'll see from the photos, maybe Natalie can go back to that photo, to be very close to what exists now. So it does not, it looks very close to what exists in the street now, because we wanted to keep it very close to what's on the street at this time.
Well, there's a lot of comments. I mean, I think it's great in some ways to have this ability to tell a history in some way on a city street so people can really better understand their communities. And it's tricky how to best do that. First of all, I would say this is a wonderful opportunity for a design competition to design this very base for these plaques. I think to simply resurrect the classicist design from the 1990s doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think it's not a particularly great design. I'm shocked that it was originally done in iron. That's extraordinary, knowing that, of course, that would rust. But anyway, I just think this doesn't have anything to do with other street furniture in the city. And I would think that you would want to, and I don't know, has this been presented yet, for example, to the Department of City Planning, or for example, to the Municipal Arts Society, or the Van Allen Institute, or any of the, city
I'll
architecture
speak
groups?
to that.
Sure,
No, it has not, but it has been presented to the NYC Department of Transportation. And a reasoning for keeping this same design is that, all along we've been imagining these as a replacement in kind, since they have become so worn down and in poor condition. And frankly, the first step was that they just need to be replaced. So with the NYC DOT's, in partnership with them and in a discussion, we were encouraged to keep it as a replacement in kind, and thus we kept this original historic design, which I think in a way does reflect the historic district of Lower Manhattan and it being the oldest neighborhood.
Well, again, I think that it's great that you're coming to the community. And again, I've mentioned this, I think, prior in other Alliance presentations, that it's always great to get the community's input in before it's finished. And so I'm delighted to see that we have an opportunity to opine, but I think this is a missed opportunity. This is a personal note. I'm an architect, but who cares? But anyway, I think it is a missed opportunity to not reconsider this design and allow designers in New York to look at this, because this is, a really great opportunity. So that would be one thing. And on the plaques themselves, in terms of the history that you are now exploring, things have, of course, changed over the years. And my concern is that having one historian from the Museum of the City of New York seems really, I'm delighted that that's happening, but I think you need a lot more input on what kind of history you're showing. Do we have additional plaques, and why, where they should go? There's a great interest in talking about history that we never hear about, particularly African-American history in these neighborhoods. All of these things that come up, I just think, I would hope that we could have a whole panel of people thinking about what the history is and what the verbiage on these plaques might say. So here again, I I just think, it might be a opportunity for a little more input and a little more thought as to what and why things are going where they're going and why they're going there. And so anyway, that's just another thought that I'm sort of putting. I guess that's not a question. It's a concern and something that I'd like the committee to think about.
Sure.
I think I'll shut up for now. I can't promise I won't come back. Thanks.
Thanks, Alice. I just wanted to sort of comment a little, comment on your comment, and to say, as Natalie mentioned, for the purposes of this particular project, the ones that are out there are just falling apart, right? So for us, it's just really important to fix the ones that we have. Now we've, unfortunately, we've been very, very restricted into being able to add more markers in different parts of the district to convey a broader program for this in other parts of the neighborhood, to include other historical references for other moments in history across including various perspectives. We've been limited to do that. We've wanted to add more, and we've been told that we can't. So
perhaps the plaques you have can though be adapted to so that they're covering different ground. Arguably you don't have to have the exact same information. That's another approach.
So we are, I guess what two things. One, I would say is that we are, I could say that we are open to discussing with the community board and whoever is sort of interested in possibly doing something, I don't know what, I don't want to, give it a name, but like a phase 2, like what would that look like to do something different with these? This is not part of this application. And in terms of what we're expected to do, what we're required to do, we're following, the Public Design Commission's process to update and upgrade these. So we are, adhering to the process that has been sort of laid out for us. And, the panel size is, we're limited in terms of size. So we would be, along with the museum and the historian in conjunction with other people at the Museum of City, New York, to, fit as much as we can into that one particular panel, contingent on where it's located. So in our mind, it's basically, the content that's there relates to where the person is standing, right? And again, it serves a purpose of providing some historical information and also providing some, a map for people, which I know people seem to respond well to, use them, and we find them of good use.
I'll just add quickly that
Sure.
there is a lead historian appointed to this project, but they are able to work and are working with the full range of experts at the City Museum of New York to include additional information. We emphasize that we want to include additional information about underrepresented histories of Lower Manhattan, in particular Black history and queer history, of which this content has been added to panels where applicable. As Taina said, we're subject to the specific location. So on certain panels, new content and updated history has been added.
I guess it would be great to share this with the community board. For example, the city council has legislation in front of it on the Freedom Heritage Trail, or the Freedom Trail, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be included now on these plaques?
So, that Jimmy Van Bramer, I think the council member Van Bramer is sort of taking the lead in introducing that bill. We would be sort of very happy to sort of, potentially work on that. When I alluded to phase 2, that's sort of what I'm thinking about when it concerns something, doing something else or addition to what we already have. So we are definitely open to having that discussion. I'm not sure if that, if that bill, how long that would take to pass, where the money would come from. There are a lot of sort of moving parts to that. But something that we're definitely interested in potentially exploring, and we still, for us, it's important to do these first. I'm sorry, my light just turned off. To do these first, and then sort of figure out with the stakeholders and people who are interested in having a conversation about the future.
Okay, I'd like to give some other people an opportunity because we do have a lot of other speakers, so let's move it along. Thank you, Alice. Tammy.
Thanks, Taina. You mentioned that you were limited. It's limited in this phase. Could you explain how you're limited and why?
So the marker, the 26, in terms of the heritage trail markers, the 26 heritage trail markers, the location of where they exist now was determined and is approved by DOT. So we don't decide where they are. We don't decide where they are, where they can move. We can't get them moved to someplace else. We can't relocate them. We cannot add more. That is not something we're allowed to do. Our responsibility lies solely in maintaining and taking care of the ones that exist right now and the locations that they are currently.
Do you know if there was a public process associated with their determinations of where those should be at all?
I did, Natalie and I did a little research in the Heritage Trails New York project that I think was led by the Kaplan Fund, so when this was erected in the 90s as a project there was a total, I think, of 39 that was supposed to expand to other parts of New York City, and for whatever reason, it didn't. So we don't have, I don't have the, exact history for you today, but I can definitely send that to you and the rest of the board to sort of provide you some further information about that.
That would be great. Do you know if there's any connection between the Heritage Trail markers that you are doing and the Heritage Trail markers that are on the Greenway connected to
on the what? I'm sorry?
On the Greenway that connects with the bike path?
Oh, Natalie, do you know the answer to that question?
Well, I wish I could see the signs you're referring to. Do they have the same type of stanchion as these?
No. They're new, which is why I was asking. I'll take
Well, I would assume no, because I just
we don't know about them, right?
Don't know this type of sign.
Got it.
I mean, I do know, I will say just anecdotally, I do know there are other, in other parts of the state, similar looking stanchions that, mark different places for actual trails that people walk, in, hikes in different places throughout the state. So, I don't know the one I don't specifically know about that one, but we can look into it as well and get back to you. We'll add it to the list for follow-up, Natalie.
Thank you both very much.
Sure.
Okay, Rosa, why don't you go next?
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I have to say, I love the Heritage Trail markers. I frequently see tourists reading them. And whenever I have a moment, when I'm not in a rush, I like to read them and learn little things about the city that I never knew before. So I'm really happy that you are maintaining and updating them. Just graphically, I feel like the eye for information seems like really universally recognizable and much larger when it's within that bright red circle rather than going to the square. And I get why you're going to the square because it works better with your logo, but then the eye gets reduced in size and it's a little bit less visible. And I feel like the city is such a dense environment to begin with. Anything that helps people understand that there's information that they might need there help is a good thing. I also think that the photos are really important as well, because I think a lot of the target audience is tourists. And for a lot of them, English may not be their first language. And also because the writing is sort of necessarily small because of the density of information you're trying to relay in these small signs. A photo just pops out, right? Oh, Brooklyn Bridge, that's where I'm going, or the stock has changed, that's where I'm going. And they recognize that from their, guidebooks rather than having to read the words and try to figure out if that's where they want to be. So I guess I just want to say I'm excited that you guys are doing this. I understand from the comments that you've made so far that this is really more of a maintenance project than it is a rethinking or expanding of it. But I really do hope that you do rethink and expand it, because I feel like it is it's a really cool thing for New Yorkers to just take a moment and read and learn a little bit about the city that we walk on and sort of the history of our neighborhood, which is incredibly rich.
So it's a great opportunity for both us, but also for the tourists that come here. And so, yeah, I like it. But I do hope you do more, because it is a little bit of a lost opportunity, especially this year, with everything that's been going on. I know that I have personally been learning a hell of a lot about the history in this neighborhood, and especially the Black history in this neighborhood that I was not aware of before. And I feel like that's a really important thing that that does need to be memorialized here in our neighborhood. And so I really do hope that there is some opportunity to do that, and to sort of respect what has happened in the past, which is, part of what this is all about. So thank you. Keep doing it. And I guess we now see all the damage that comes from dog urine, I guess, on the bottom of those poles.
Thank you, Rosa, for your comments. We will sort of bring them back, but I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Oh, and I like the old arrows too. They seem to just be clearer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going. Michael Kramer, did you have your hand up for this item?
Yes, I did. My question is about rebranding. To me, this is Lower Manhattan. It's not downtown. And there are some places, where you're changing the title to explore downtown instead of exploring Lower Manhattan. What is the thought behind that?
I'm sorry, my phone was, okay. Well, I mean, they're on the actual markers? Is that where you're saying that this appears on the markers?
I thought I saw, at least on some of the signs, that you're changing the title, exploring Lower Manhattan, to explore downtown. Did I miss something?
Natalie, was that, I
don't think we're using that language. And my understanding is the Alliance, we always refer to our district as Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, I'm constantly saying Lower Manhattan. We don't say downtown. Downtown could be anywhere, right? Downtown is all part of that. People say downtown for 23rd Street. So we've always tried to be very specific, and and reference it as Lower Manhattan. So I will go back to the presentation, but I don't think that was the case. But I can double check.
I mean, that was my point.
Yeah.
And the other question I have is, if you use, I don't know what the right word is, where you can scan it with your phone, and then you can get even more information. Have you considered putting that on there?
We have considered using a QR code.
QR code, thank you.
I'll say there's no resolution on this right now, but possibly as a phase 2 in hopes to, really move these signs along and get these replaced, because I think if we do include a QR code, which would link to an online source of more information about the district and Lower Manhattan in general, it would be sort of a larger project than what it is now. And we are definitely open to that in the future.
I mean, especially for tourists, they can consult their phone as they're walking.
And I think especially now with QR codes as it relates to, sort of the new normal with, post-COVID or during COVID and with COVID, QR codes became so much more used by people in restaurants and other places. So I think the adaptability to include that, I think, is important for us to go back to and revisit. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for raising it, Mike.
But while you're talking, because Michael mentioned something that I wanted to point out, there is branding issues on the signage when it comes to the historic district, because much of the dialogue that the Downtown Alliance has on the website and other things do not refer to it absolutely correctly. So if you could go back to the historic proper wording on the signage, that would be great.
On the markers themselves, you mean? I just want to be clear, I understand which, in terms of the Heritage Trail markers, or in terms of the other signage on Broadway, just to be clear.
I think the answer would be on all signage.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not just the Seaport District. It's got a full historic name that should be titled and used.
I see now what you're saying. Okay. Thank you. Yes, noted.
Okay, thank you. And Alice, you had one more comment?
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry. This is very dear to me to see street furniture like this, just kind of happening. you know, let me understand something. This is not maintenance. This is recreating the posts and the sign. Is that correct? I think maybe people are unclear. This is not about maintaining what's there. Is it? Or maybe I misunderstood. You're not making new ones, aren't you? Are you not making new ones and putting new signs in, or is that not what's happening?
We have, you know, since we took this over in 2000, and Natalie can add more, you know, specific information. Since we took it over in 2000, we have been repairing them and fixing the existing ones over time. And we've reached a point that we can no longer do that, right?
So you're creating 26 new signs.
Correct. That is correct.
So these are absolutely new. And what does each one of these cost approximately? Do you know?
Natalie?
I wish I had that unit cost for you. Would it be
ballpark?
Okay?
Must have a sense of it. I'm just curious.
Sure. Give me one moment.
My point here, just while you're looking for that, is I think that the committee and the community board should recognize, I don't see a second phase here. This is it. I mean, I think you're going to have this for a very long time. These are brand new and very lovely that you're, you know, helping fund this, I assume. Signs with a whole, you know, the aesthetic remains the same. That's quite old. And it is an opportunity to have street furniture that is different and that designers could compete for consideration of new street furniture, which is often what is done in cities throughout the world. And here we're just inheriting the same one. So I just want to make sure people understand it's not maintaining or fixing ones that are there. We're creating new ones. And I think it's, for me, I'll say again, a lost opportunity not to open up other possible designs before you make these. And additionally, I just want to talk about the signs themselves. I don't know if you can pull up the presentation again. I don't want to spend a lot more time, but you on a couple of the signs, the Downtown Alliance did not appear. I can't remember the informational name of what's the information sign, and in the existing signs, your logo and your name does not appear, but in the new ones it does. And I think less of advertising for the Alliance is frankly better. I think this is New York City, not the Alliance. And so I personally think that particular sign, if you can pull up that array, or if not, maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. I would vote for that not to change, as you've indicated in one of these. And maybe I got it wrong. So it's not this one.
So not this one. So this one has a logo on the existing, and so okay.
Right, they both have logos, but here, yeah, you have the existing and there's no logo, but here on the updated version,
the wayfinding
you do have it. And I'm just feeling like, you know, we appreciate what the Alliance does for downtown and all of that, but do we really need to add the logo there? I think it was actually quite handsome without it, and so I'm not sure what we need that for. So I would just, you know, just throw that out there. Anyway, sorry. So were you able to find the cost of each one of these?
I did. I found the cost, and it's approximately $3,500 per unit to fabricate the entire new sign. I'd just like to add to your point, you know, about not doing a phase 2. I think we are spending, you know, a budget to replace the stanchions, but the panels themselves are interchangeable. They would be replaced throughout the years for maintenance issues, and especially if we did do a phase 2 with expanded
content. I was talking about the stanchions, sorry.
Okay.
I was talking about the stanchions, yeah.
Understood.
Right. So that, I just think that's, yeah, that was a great opportunity lost potentially. So it's not too late. I throw that out there. Okay, that's it, Paul. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's try to keep it going. Try to keep your remarks as brief as you can, because we have a number of speakers and we still have 2 big items to discuss after this one. So Richard Corman.
Yes, hi, thanks. Appreciate the presentation and what you're doing. I just want to extend my first support for what Alice is saying, but I'd like to clarify where, just to be clear, where the funds are coming from this. Is this purely coming from the Downtown Alliance?
The
or
funds
is there another source of funds?
This is purely coming from the Downtown Alliance.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
That's it. Okay, in that case, I
Paul.
think, oh, Joe Lerner. Oh, wait, who's next? Who's that?
After Joe, can I come back for another question?
Okay, Joe, you go. And you have- Yeah, we hear you, Joe.
Okay, so Alice, are you going to make a motion on your thoughts about the naming?
I'm
We're
sorry,
not-
Joe. I don't
We're
understand.
not ready for that just yet. There's a lot of speakers still, so why don't we wait to hear from them before we talk about making a motion, in my opinion.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, Tammy.
Two things. One, the signs definitely are rebranding. So if you pull up the sign comparison of the skyscrapers that you had. And two, Taina, one of the concerns that I want to ask and be very clear, the Downtown Alliance has a customer base. The signs that have existing and look at additional areas may be places that are not necessarily under the Downtown Alliance control. Would your funding of these signs therefore eliminate places that might not be within your direct pay or purview because you're funding the program?
So the existing, so if I am understanding your question correctly, the existing 26 that exists right now, there are a few, maybe 2 or 3 out of the 26 that are outside of the bid, and those are included. So we are going to replace those, and we currently maintain those now. If we were to do, petition or, go to the city or DOT to possibly do additional stanchion or additional markers in other parts of the bid, it would be within the bid because that's the area under which DOT would allow us to do it because that's sort of our purview. So if there were going to, be markers in Tribeca, for example, that's not within our bid, that would be something that we would not be able to do.
But my question was, if you take a look at your presentation, the signs definitely say exploring Lower Manhattan versus exploring downtown. And then if you also look at the old sign that has, also in this neighborhood, there are other locations. If those locations are not fiscal supporters of the Downtown Alliance, does that disqualify them from being listed on the sign?
No.
Thank you. And I know there's members of the public, so I'm going to let them go.
And I'm looking at the presentation. I see on the existing, it says exploring Lower Manhattan. So I just want to be sure I'm not, on the other one, it says exploring Lower Manhattan.
Somebody found one on the 40 Wall Street one. That's it.
I see. Okay. I just want to be clear. I know. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Okay, let's go with some public speakers. Todd Fine, and unmute. Thank you.
Yes. Hello. Yes, working with the Harlem Historical Society, the Washington Street Advocacy Group authored a brief detailing 10 reasons to rethink this Heritage Trail initiative. We urge all members to look at this brief, which I believe was distributed to all members of the committee. We believe that this project is not consistent with everything happening in society, forcing a larger encounter with history. It is very nakedly an attempt to put the most recent Downtown Alliance branding with a red stripe on signs that may last for 25 years. This signage network is an incomplete descendant of projects from the bicentennial in 1976 and the mid-90s. Almost half of those signs have been demolished, and only the arbitrary surviving signs will be updated as a part of this project. The drafting of these signs does not appear to be driven by experts or properly vetted. One anonymous historian is not qualified to address all these complex historical locations with updated material. We believe that this moment calls for a broader plan, listening to more voices. This would have a social benefit and economic benefit for tourism. We would like any resolution to oppose PDC approval and state that the Downtown Alliance work with Community Board 1 to establish a new task force working with educational institutions in the city and a diversity of civic groups to assess how the Heritage Trail Network could be updated. Rewriting all the signs makes it go beyond maintenance, and it is unfair to describe this as maintenance. Even the Alliance concedes that DOT has put unreasonable restrictions on this, preventing it from being done properly and comprehensively. Once you approve this with its sole focus on Downtown Alliance branding, a phase 2 might never fit within the plan. We should start from scratch. Thank you.
Okay. Let's keep the comments going. And all right, Taylor Banning.
Hi, thank you. I'm Taylor Banning. I live in Battery Park City. And would Todd be willing to put info in the chat so we could learn more about, I'm not a member of the board, so I didn't get access to this article. And I think he mentioned he's a part of Harlem Fund, and I don't remember his full name. So is there a way to learn a little bit more about Todd? And then my comment is, thank you to the board members who spoke. Thank you for the presentation. I think in many ways I agree with Todd. I agree with Michael, Alice, and Rosa. The first note about the QR codes, I know Black Gotham, who was actually presented at this committee before, has walking tours, and I think it's able to be put in a QR code type thing. So there could be a way to incorporate the work that they do. Also, the African Burial Ground has plenty of information and history that can be incorporated and maybe partnered with. And I guess in that same vein, I agree with many people who have spoken and Todd that maybe there's a way that we can really take time and really hear from many voices, especially Black, Indigenous, people of color, even queer voices, to really make these signs reckon with our history. I grew up here. I was born in the 90s. I don't remember any of these signs. I don't remember learning something from these signs so far, sadly. I do remember sometimes looking at them for like directions every now and then, but in terms of picking up on a piece of history that maybe expanded my knowledge of as someone said, the oldest neighborhood of New York City. We have a lot to do here to learn and teach our kids about and really make this an equitable space. So yeah, I guess I agree that maybe as is, we shouldn't necessarily support this, and there's a little bit more work and collaboration to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan Malvern.
Hi. Can you hear me? Did I get unmuted? Okay,
Yes.
Cool. Hey, wanted to say first I had a question. Because the Alliance does, there are clients and that sort of thing. Would a business have an opportunity to be able to sort of sponsor one of the signs? That's a question.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Through the Downtown Alliance, and if a business nearby knew there was one of these wayfaring plaques in their vicinity, would businesses be able to sponsor a specific sign and maybe have their name put on it? Or is that a way to maybe take care of some of the costs, that sort of thing? I'm just curious if there's a way for businesses to sponsor the signs within the Alliance.
I could answer that.
Sure, thank you.
The answer is no. We are only providing information about, not-for-profit organizations on the signs. Nothing about them is to promote for-profit businesses, but rather to represent the history and cultural institutions in the neighborhood.
Cool, thank you for that. And also I agree with Rose's point about the wayfaring signs specifically. I think the pictures are much more impactful than the words. I walk by words all the time and I don't see them. Pictures speak to me. So in the wayfaring signs, I really prefer the old design as far as pictures of what's going to catch someone's eye and what they're looking for when they're a tourist. And then also, I just wanted to say that in the past, in the CB1 committees I've been to, generally a resolution is very specific to the details of a project. LPC doesn't just approve the idea of LPC within Community Board 1 doesn't just approve the idea of a building. And I feel like that's kind of what's being asked of the board. And I don't know if that's particularly fair. I think that the board should be presented with a complete package so they can look at wording, at pictures, and have that sort of input. So based on that alone, I would suggest that the board does not approve this proposal. But thanks for your time, and they do need attention, and I know this is a hard thing to get a hold of, but I'm excited about it, and I hope that it can come out in a great way.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Megan. Jacob Morris.
Am I hearable?
Yes, we got you.
Oh, good, good. I don't know if my video is up, but okay. I'm the director of the Harlem Historical Society and also the proposer for a long, long time of the New York City Freedom Trail. The legislation just recently cleared the Cultural Affairs Committee to establish a task force to establish a freedom trail in downtown Manhattan. And this is pursuant to a resolution that unanimously passed Community Board 1 way back in 2012. God bless Community Board 1 for doing that. I want to say unequivocally that this proposal by the Downtown Alliance needs to be tabled pending further submission. I would like to particularly thank Michael Kramer and the last lady who spoke for their critique and comments. Any signage that is newly designed and installed in downtown Manhattan should absolutely include a QR code. I mean, we are in the present. We are not in the past. These QR codes would add a tremendous informational dimension to these wayfinding, critically important to the history and the awareness and consciousness of all the historical significance of any of these sites. And you know, in regards to the comment made by the last speaker, she's absolutely correct. The board is owed a full submission, not a concept. And so also, you know, something that troubles me is that originally in the original designs, there was a bunch of collaborators that were mentioned at the bottom of their respective signs. Important organizations that were equally responsible for the initial signage. And they've been obliterated. And on that basis alone, the Downtown Alliance needs to go back to the table and include them because they were part of the initial concept. And so it's incredibly disrespectful to the original organizations that participated in the original concept and design and content, all of the Heritage Trail to be included in the attribution. In regards to that, they got one anonymous historian from the Museum of the City in New York to vet the content. That's absolutely inadequate. There's so much new scholarship that needs to be incorporated. And frankly, I think that more diverse and universally appreciated historians with expertise in the history of downtown Manhattan needs to be included in an advisory task force to help the Downtown Alliance do this better. Again, please table this proposal. Thank you.
Okay. I would ask the remaining speakers if you agree with some comments that you heard, just leave it at that or say that rather than repeating the same comments that we've heard a few times already. So with that, let's go on to some people who I know are looking to be heard. Art Piccolo.
Hi, am I on?
You are.
Yeah, I wanted to just repeat what a lot of other speakers said. Should be an ambitious project. This is an opportunity for us to do better and more imaginative. And the idea of approving this proposal at this point, as many other speakers said, make no sense. This is serious. We should take it serious, and it should get the kind of attention, including benchmarking it against what other cities are doing with their historic markers, finding out what are the best examples around the world and try to work off of them. Also, although not necessary, I think we should consider the possibility, especially if other cities are doing it, the possibility of electronic signage that can be very imaginative and can include a lot more information on a rotating basis. Thank you.
Okay, Linda Roche.
Thank you. So I agree with just about everything everybody has said, but I do have two comments. One is, and I'm going back to the Seaport area. The Seaport area has to have the word historic in it, even if Howard Hughes Corporation doesn't want it there. It really does need to be there because it is the historic district. The other item I just wanted to make mention of is Alice's thought of doing a competition, and I think that would really be a good idea and bring some fresh new ideas to the table. So, and table this for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to the committee. Mark Amoruso.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree with most everyone said. There's a speaker before. I forgot his name from the public. And then I think we should table this.
All right.
I think a little more research with a starians to get the kind of things right or things that should be there. I'll just give a plug to Peter Alberti, who was first Italian to land in New York State. He has a marker at Battery Place. Things like that. And everyone knows their own knowledge of what should be there. So to table it and get back to basics.
All right. You know what? At this stage, I'm going to ask the committee, we're hearing a lot of consensus on having misgivings about this particular application and wanting it to be changed or tabled. Is there consensus to ask for that at this stage and then reconvene what do you want to do?
Paul, I think the question for the applicant is what their timeline is, because I believe they need a resolution. So it's not about tabling the proposal. It's about providing a resolution that provides guidance for them, whether or not it's going to be approved, whether the community supports it as such or wants changes.
All right.
To that extent, I'd like to understand what's driving the urgency for this proposal. Why is it being pushed so quickly?
Yeah, and Tammy, based on what you said, isn't it up to the applicant if they want to put their application on hold if they so chose?
Oh,
Go ahead, Diana.
No, I thank you, Tammy, for your comment. So I would, we would not want it to be tabled. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is if the committee wanted to, put together a resolution, laying out or indicating, the recommendations or the suggestions that have been heard today in a resolution, that's something that, we would be, would prefer. We would like to continue sort of moving on track with this application. It is our intention for it to continue going forward. I mean, we feel really strongly that there is nobody, in terms of looking at these markers and, updating them or replacing them, the ones that are just, literally falling apart. I mean, we can show more examples of how they look on the street. We feel that we are trying to, make a good effort in working to get them replaced or to improve the ones that are there. I mean, the actual physicality of the stanchions. So, I mean, obviously, a lot of people here have raised a lot of concerns that, that we'll, consider looking at or addressing. The idea of the QR code is sort of very interesting and important, and we think we should definitely look into that, Natalie. And I will say about our branding, I mean, we've changed our logo once in 25 years. I mean, I the branding that we have now, or the logo that we have, is a bar that is pretty simple, and it's a design element that is supposed to imply like everything south or everything, south of the bar or below the bar is sort of considered our district in Lower Manhattan. So I would, push back a little bit on the fact that, that there is this sort of sentiment or belief among certain people or people who've been here tonight that we are sort of over branding ourselves. I would not agree with that. I also wanted to just mention that we have worked extensively with Kamau Ware of the Black Gotham Experience. We have had a lot of partnerships with him. He has led walking tours. He has led webinars on the history of the Black diaspora, the African diaspora rather, in Lower Manhattan. And we've also produced, documentation and videos and collateral on the LGBT community in Lower Manhattan and the history of that. So I just want to sort of, we're not trying to do something that is disingenuous or to leave, to leave people out. We sort of have made we believe, a fair project to like literally just replace what's there with something that is, not broken or not rusted and not deteriorated. This is, we're not trying to, circumvent or go against people or to try and, do something that's misleading. So I'm, to be honest, I feel that, I was, I guess, sad to hear that people feel that we're trying to like, like we're trying to take over the neighborhood or we're trying to like have our name splashed everywhere. That's not our intention here at all. And I think if there's nobody stepping up to replace these. I mean, the fact that the ones that we have there are only there because we pushed and pushed and pushed DOT to keep them. They want to take them all out. So, and if it was up to them, they would. If it wasn't for us, they would not be there, and there would be nobody putting them in there. This is not something the city wants. Maybe with a new administration, it'd be very different when we have a new mayor in January. So, I don't know. But anyway, so I mean, I would sort of leave it to you, Paul, to decide how you want to proceed. I would, I think we don't want to table this. We want to continue to move forward and see what PDC says, right? PDC will be looking at all this information and reviewing the application that we submit, and it'll be sort of up to them to decide what they, how they feel about that. And of course, the community board can weigh in there as well.
Can I just ask one question, Paul, or to Taina? I just want to know, does the city have no plan to have any kind of signage indicating any of the history of the city? There is no such thing that exists?
That is our understanding, correct, yes.
I think we should get more information on
there
that.
There was actually previous commissioners of DOT, and previous administration have different views upon this, but there is no current plan. There is no plan for in the future to have that. So we are trying, our very best to maintain, actual living markers in the district for people to use, to serve that purpose. So
I just think that requires more conversation, and I think it's something the community board should really pursue. I mean, these are basically billboards on a public street. Let's not forget, this is signage on a public street, and so I hope that we can have a little bit more say on it. Anyway, thanks.
All right. So I guess we have the usual options. We could say yes with certain conditions. The second phase, we want a lot of things taken care of.
Okay.
If you want to see
Well,
any of it,
I'm in a meeting.
If you want to see
Yes.
Let me mute Joe's line. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so that's one option to say yes, but we have a lot of concerns and we want a phase two. Okay. Number two, we could say no, there's just too many flaws in this and we want them to come back and work with the community to redesign. That was the essence of, I think, the majority of the people saying no.
Paul, can I just interject one moment? I'm saying really quickly. I just noticed on the names up here, the windows of the meeting. I see Jen Young here from DOT, and I just noticed that she's here. I'm not sure if she can hear me, but if she wanted to weigh in here at all, Jen, about this and what DOT's position is on these markers as a co-applicant, I welcome that.
Hi, this is Jen here. I don't have, I'm here just to listen to this presentation and see, where we end up with it. I don't know, maybe Nick, he's also on with us. If there's anything else that we can let the board know.
Hi, yeah, this is Nick Fatnati from New York City DOT. Again, I think, we are ultimately the applicant that will be submitting this to the Design Commission on the Downtown Alliance's behalf. I think we have been collaborating closely with them, primarily under the premise that this is a replacement in kind project. Obviously, I think we understand and are very sympathetic to the safety concerns that deteriorating signs pose to the general public, and are definitely supportive of their replacement. I think we're happy to entertain larger or more ambitious proposals, but we would certainly need to understand what that is specifically. But yeah, so I think we've been working very closely with the Alliance. We are supportive of the proposal as it stands, and are happy to continue to work with the Alliance and the Community Board should it evolve.
Thank you. Andrew, my co-chair, why don't you weigh in on this? You have any recommendation?
I have a thought, but before, I guess, sharing that, do we have a view that this larger plan or strategy or vision would even fall under the auspices of the Downtown Alliance? To me, it sounds like it would be other authorities, whether it's DOT or other agencies. So I'm not sure, as it relates to this grand vision or scheme that we're asking for, what the Alliance's role would be in something like that. And I ask that question because it does dovetail to, I guess, my own personal thought, which is, if you've seen some of these, they absolutely need to be fixed, whether replaced or repaired, I don't know. But it's kind of embarrassing that we have these signs in the current condition that they're in, and to let them just continue to sit, I think is short-sighted. So I think there's an interim step that can be taken while we still advocate for a broader vision or scheme as it relates to an overall program.
All right, let me suggest that we put something like that to a vote, see if it gets approved. And if it doesn't, then we'll go to a different plan.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the grand vision here, Paul, and I don't understand Andrew's point of a grand vision. The vision is simply to take the opportunity of replacing and creating a new signs at a tune of about $100,000, which is a lot of money for the Alliance to spend, and get them right, get them done so that they do respond to the history that is of today, that they do potentially respond to the architecture and the city street in a different way than 30 years ago. This is a great opportunity, and it's great that we have that. There's no grand vision here other than to take this opportunity, which is replacing these things, not maintaining them, and they're going to be replaced, and getting it in a different way that responds to the concerns that have been addressed here tonight. So to me, it's a, let's keep moving forward with this very, fair idea. I don't see where this, I don't see that as a complicated concept.
Yeah, I guess what I meant by, I understand what you're saying. I think there were many comments that were considerably far reaching beyond what you just said. You know, we heard about electric signs, we heard about QR codes, we heard about, I think a number of different technologies. So I think it extends, or at least what I heard, and maybe I heard it incorrectly, a lot of the commentary extended well beyond, I think, what you just articulated.
Paul, if we're going to do it, let's do it right. And it seems to me the current way of doing it is not right or correct. We should hold off, give our either, I think we best should table it, put our minds together and come back with something better that we have. If we're going to do it, let's do it right.
Paul, do you have a point of information, Paul?
Yeah.
Question. So, it seems like the applicant, and tell me if I'm wrong, if we table it, doesn't seem. I mean, these signs and the signs that are there now are not going to fall down a month from now. So, tabling it, it seems like they're going to go forward. So I think, unfortunately, since they seem to go forward and don't think we should table it and just are kind of tacitly saying we're taking what we're saying under consideration, and there's a pretty big consensus here, I think, with everyone. I think we should just outright reject it and ask them to come back. That would be my proposal, and that would be the end of it.
Well, can I just suggest, Paul, that we use all these comments that were really thoughtful tonight to just move this forward as a, as the resolution simply stating what we would like to see with the wayfinding signs going forward so that the Public Design Commission understands that the community wants to, go forward go forward in a certain way, in the ways that we've described tonight.
But what's the rush? What is the rush here?
Well,
I mean, very much concerned about this, and we're not getting answers. I think we need to have a follow-up with them. Moving forward doesn't really help me at all about how this is going to work out.
Mark, I just want to point out, just as a note, that we had to, one almost was practically falling down in February, and we had to remove it, and it almost fell, it basically almost fell onto the street. So just in terms of like timing, we did this, 2 months ago.
Okay, let's wrap this up one way or the other.
Can I
propose the resolution about rejecting it and asking them to come back? If there's a second, I don't know.
Mark, you interrupted me, but that's okay. I was going to make a counter proposal, is that Paul takes a straw poll to start with, or Diana does, to figure out which way to go.
Yeah, that was where I was heading about 20 minutes ago, but let's do it now. Yes with conditions, or no, let's table it. So how many go for option one?
But there's a third option, rejecting it.
Isn't there no with conditions?
Isn't there a no with conditions, which is exactly what Alice is proposing?
All right, let's start with this. Do you want to vote yes or no? And then we could add the conditions to either one. Okay. So how many want to vote yes and then put in a whole range of conditions?
Paul, how
do you want us to show this, Paul?
What's that?
We just say it
How
by
do you want us to vote?
Why don't I just, I'm just going to go through a roll call.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Paul?
I vote no at this point.
Andrew Zelter?
I'm yes with conditions.
Mark Amoruso?
I'm a no with that. We're asking them to return back with new designs or whatever based on the comments.
Okay. Alice Blank?
No with conditions.
Rosa Chang?
Yes with conditions.
Wendy Chapman?
Yes with conditions.
Kathy Gupta? Okay. Liz Lemire? I'm sorry, Kathy, was it you? Okay, Elizabeth Lewinson? Joe Lerner?
No.
Dennis is not here. Bob Townley is not here. Richard Corman?
No with conditions.
Okay, and David Sheldon? Okay, let's see.
He needs to unmute if he wants to vote.
No with conditions.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, let me count these. The no's are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no's, and 1, 2, 3 yeses.
All right. So what conditions would, I've heard a number of conditions, QR codes, design competitions, those seem pretty straightforward. What else?
Additional
Consult historians. I mean, I gave just one example of something that's, it's not just recent history, it's the beginning of history.
Okay, that's a good one. Fine. I mean, we'll put this to a vote, of course. Anyone else?
Keep using the word Lower Manhattan.
Okay.
Make sure the sign's Downtown Alliance is not added into the existing sign, and that the advertising of the Alliance is minimalized.
Use of electronic signage.
Keeping the images.
Yeah, I would second lots of images.
And Paul, that they return with a new or updated proposal based on our comments.
Who is they?
The pretty people that are giving their presentation at the moment.
Both the Alliance and DOT, I would say.
Yeah, they're the ones who spoke. Is there anyone else that I missed? I don't tell me. Or is that's it?
Those cover the applicants.
And that the next presentation or the future presentations include precise locations and what exactly each plaque is covering. There are only 26 of them. It seems like something we could look at.
All right, Diana, you're writing quickly, right?
Yeah, I think I have everything.
Okay. So are you ready to put the package to a vote? Let's do it.
Did Todd Fine or the other historian have any other interesting conditions? Anyone can remember?
Paul, do you want me to call back to Todd? It says Freedom Trail Incorporation. Do you want me to go back to Todd?
Yeah, let's just get it. They had some good ideas, both of them.
Hi, Todd.
Hi, yes. I would like to add that the Freedom Trail be considered, how it would be fit within this potential network, and that there be explicit instructions on that. And I think the historian point covers my main other concerns, but I definitely think that should be fleshed out to the point where we have a committee of clear historians of diverse backgrounds who can verify these sites.
And when we talk about historians, do we think that covers all the different groups that have been mentioned? I know, I think there was mention of the LGBT community. When we talk about historians, are we talking about the full context of groups that were referenced?
I would say of a variety of issues, especially including issues that haven't been dealt with so far that could potentially be done in phase 2 as well.
May I make a suggestion that I don't know if we need the word verified for historians versus varied to be inclusive. Because verified indicates that the historians perhaps from the New York Historical Society are not verifiable. But I think we could use variety or inclusive.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are we ready?
Paul, I think we have two folks from the public who may have recommendations on conditions. May I call to them?
Give them each 1 minute, please.
Okay, Taylor, I'm going to you first.
It's really short. Just maybe they partner with Black Gotham and African Burial Ground on the signs, and maybe with the QR codes, which you could easily make into like a sticker or a magnet and put on them. It shouldn't be that hard to adapt. Thank you. With walking tours.
Taylor, because Black Gotham is a for-profit company, we cannot, the applicants already said they're not putting for-profit companies on. It's not for profits, so I appreciate that, but that part cannot be part of it.
Okay, who else do we have?
And we have Jacob Morris. Jacob, do you have any specific recommendations for conditions in the resolution?
I really want to thank the community board and the members of the committee for their very insightful contributions and analysis of the proposal. And I think this is moving in the right direction. And you know, the inclusion of varied historians with expertise and knowledge of the history of Lower Manhattan will be only an asset and help provide a context for new interpretation of the history that's been presented. And they bring it back in a better way. The QR codes, on the QR codes, there'll be a lot of electronic information that'll be accessible, and that needs to be vetted also. So I'm going to go back to what Alice said, and several other of the committee members when they spoke. Bring it back the right way, and we'll get a much better quality product. And in terms of the rush, you know, waiting a month or two after more than a decade, I don't think that's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay, Paul.
Okay, so let's put this to a vote. Could you take a roll call?
Yep. Paul Goldstein.
Yes.
Andrew Zelter.
Abstain?
Mark Amoruso.
Yes.
Alice Blank.
Yes.
Rosa Chang.
Sorry, I'm still thinking.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Rosa. Wendy Chapman.
I'm going to abstain.
Kathy Gupta.
Yes.
Liz Lemire is not here. Elizabeth Lewinson. Joe Lerner.
Yes.
Okay, Dennis is not here. Bob Townley is not here. Richard Corman.
Yes.
And David Sheldon.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. Oh, I'm sorry. Rosa?
I'll go with abstain, even though that won't matter.
Okay, it still carries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor, 3 abstaining.
Thank you all. Thank you, Downtown Alliance, for a lot of time. And maybe we could still get this mutually acceptable. Anyway, thank you both.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
Night.
Let's move along. We still have 2 items. Next is Texel. As some of you know, that is a new park that recently opened. A lot of people love it. It does have some initial problems that have been identified. I think the one we've heard most about is the skateboarders who take over the park, in the words of many people, and don't allow other users to take advantage of this space. And they and they also, you know, abuse some of the equipment that's not meant for jumping on, etc. And we also had some issues of landscaping not being fenced or blocked off and people walking and damaging that. So let's start with those two issues. And Ricardo Hinkle is here from Parks Department. Thank you for sitting
Hi, good evening. You're welcome.
through. Do you have any
My name is
updates on
Ricardo
these
Hinkle.
issues?
Yes, I'm the Deputy Director of the Manhattan team at NYC Parks Capital for landscape architecture. And we did get the fencing put up to protect that since I was here last month. We did get the fencing put up to protect the planting beds. That was done by Manhattan Operations. We also had the contractor take out the metal arm rests on the tiered granite block seat structure, where we thought they were presented the most risk and hazard to the kids who were climbing on it. So those things have already been done. Since the last meeting, we have noticed, and people have complained about the skateboarders. So we brought that to the landscape architect's attention. That was Quinnell Rothschild, and the landscape architect there is Allison Shipley. She designed a system of metal skate stops that will be installed on the granite block seats that are along Front Street. You know, there's two sides to Front Street where Front Street dead ends. And on both of those sides, there are these fairly large granite block seats. And they're going to now have the skate stops put on them, so the skaters won't be able to use those edges for their skating. At least, you know, that's what we're hoping. Those have been ordered. They have arrived, I believe. The skate stops have arrived, and the contractor has scheduled to install them tomorrow. So it may take a couple of days, but hopefully by the end of the week, they'll all be installed. So those are the three problems that we've heard about and that we're trying to address the best we can.
Just to be clear, I was told that fencing went up in some areas, but not all, to prevent, and there are still some landscaped areas that are not protected. Is that?
Okay. I will be going there tomorrow to take a look because they're going to be starting to install the skate stops. So I'll check on that. I'm not sure. I thought they were put up in all the plant beds. I saw pictures of them, but I didn't see them, you know, every plant bed.
Okay, and the skate stops, we appreciate that. Let's see if that works. And I will just add that this community board is fighting to create a skating area or reclaim one at the Brooklyn Bridge that was very well used for many, many years. So we recognize that skateboarders want and need a place to go, and we'll see if we could get that done with the help of DOT. We're still working on it.
Okay. We'll see to what extent.
If you think you could be of any assistance to us, let us know. We could use all the help we.
Is it on parkland or is it DOT?
It's DOT as far as I know. It's the land right adjacent to the bridge, sort of right underneath it. It was called the Brooklyn Bridge Banks. Okay, moving along. Do we have any further questions on this item? I see hands up. Is that for this item? I guess we'll find out. Okay, Joanne Gorman.
Am I unmuted?
You're good.
Yeah, I really feel bad. I mean, the park is beautiful, and the other day, 3 of the park's rangers or whatever had to face a group of young people, and as they would go to one side, they would go to the other side, and it was a shame because it's such a beautiful effort. But the other thing that I did, I walk my dog in the morning, and I went down there one day last week, and the garbage cans were turned over with the garbage all over the plaza. So I was wondering if there's any other kind of garbage can you can use so that people won't open and toss it all over. I felt really bad. I mean, there was food garbage everywhere.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at that and see what the garbage can types are like, and you know, at this, we usually put in big bellies, so it's hard to turn them over. I don't think we did in this
No,
location.
there were no big bellies there.
Yeah.
Yeah. They took
Okay.
the top off and just dumped the garbage can out, you know?
Sad and unfortunate. Okay.
All right, yeah, that's too bad. Beautiful new park. Okay, thank you, Joanne. Linda Hellstrom.
Hi. First, I want to say that this is an absolutely beautiful park, and it is a wonderful example of a cooperation between the Parks Department, the CB1, and the community, because there was one presentation, and then people gave input, and you all listened, and it is gorgeous. I feel bad, as Paul said, about the skateboarders because the Brooklyn Banks Bridge Park ought to be opened. And having those stops there is wonderful. My idea was thinking of putting a couple of benches there, but that works just as well. And I thank you. I feel bad, but the young kids were getting sort of overrun. So thank you for doing such a beautiful job on the park.
Thank you very much. And, you know, parks, one of the things we've learned too, that has been evolving is our community input, and we've gotten better and better at it. So I appreciate that you recognize that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let's see who else we have. Andre Corpus.
No, we're off. We're good. Oh, are we unmuted?
Yes.
Hi. This is actually Amy Ventura and my partner Andre Corpus. We actually live on Peck Slip and also are delighted with the park. I actually also work for Landscape Forums, who did the benches in the park, as well as Fish Bridge Dog Park and whatnot. So yay. And so happy to hear about the skate stops being added. I was just wondering if you're considering putting skate stops further along down, closer to South Street, because they're just going to move down there to those granite seat walls along the edge of Peck Slip.
Well, one of the things oh, excuse me, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add also that I think they're probably going to move down there, but you know, certainly a great start to have them on the Front Street side. And then my second question had to do with the plantings, because yes, there is a fence up around one of the areas, but that's only one out of maybe 4 or 5. So it sounds like maybe they're going to be going up on the other ones, but I think there's probably going to have to be a bit of replanting, because there's a lot of the plants have been kind of permanent. I've been out there looking, and a lot of them they're just not coming up at all. And then just one last thing, there's a few tree pits around the sidewalks across from the parks that lost trees back in August in the storm. And I was wondering if there was any possibility to have that be included in the plantings in the Peck Slip Park to redo those trees or put something else in those pits.
Are they across the street?
They're on Peck Slip, but not on the park side, on the sidewalk in front of the restaurants.
So they may be out of the work area, and we might not be able to do them as part of this contract because they're outside the limit of work. But we'll focus on at least getting the plantings correct within the park site, and then try to replace them while we still have a contractor on board. I mean, the contractor's been trying to be released, but they still have a planting guarantee which lasts a year. But if they were turned over, they didn't just fail on their own, but if it's been sort of like the public trampling through them that resulted in the plants not coming back, they are not guaranteed for that, and we would have to buy new plants from them. But hopefully the contractor is still on board, and we can still we can overrun the plant and plant some more plants to keep those things full. But I'll look into that. Yeah, and as
thank you.
As far as the street trees, I could bring that to the attention of the street trees division, see if there's any possibility for them to go in there.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, let me see if there's anyone else here. I don't know. Rosa, do you want to speak on this item?
Thank you. So I obviously want to second the plug for the restoration of the banks. I think that skateboarders are also citizens and members of the public, and they do have the right to use public space, but unfortunately there does seem to be a natural tension that arises or friction between specific uses and also the property damage issue. I am a little sad to hear about the skate stops being installed. I get why you guys are doing it, but I would hope that maybe you could look at sort of a timed access kind of thing, and not outlaw skateboarding in the park completely. Just because I do feel like there is a growing demographic of skaters. I mean, on my 15-minute walk to Whole Foods this weekend, I think I counted like 40 on the street, and they were all very young. And so I feel like, if that's something that they want to do, they do have to actually like have a space to do that. And since we've taken that space away from them for over a decade, where do we expect them to go? So that's one thing. Secondly, I hadn't even realized that plantings had been planted because I thought it was just being left barren until they were eventually going to get to that
That's not a
point.
good sign. Okay.
So I'm sort of, that was just my take on it, not being a landscape person. But yeah, I don't think they ever like even came out. So that's my read of that situation. Thank you very much. And please help us with getting the banks reopened.
Paul? Paul?
Yes, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I hate to be a negative here, but we are talking about Peck Slip, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Skateboarders destroy property. They destroy where people would like to sit. And so I don't know how you get joined together in something, except we're working on the Brooklyn Bridge side. But they do destroy sitting property. Number two, on the southwest portion, there are no trees. And I think we should have some shade trees planted there as well as in the other places.
I think one of the reasons we could not put more trees at Peck Slip was the utilities that were going underneath. There were a lot of existing shallow utilities that prevented us from putting as many trees as we would have wanted to.
Okay.
So we were limited. We were limited to the one side of the park.
Gotcha.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Megan Malvern.
Hey, thanks. First of all, Ricardo, bless you and bless your brain and bless this park. I'm so happy to have it. I appreciate it. As far as the skate park situation is concerned, there is one by the Manhattan Bridge. It's not that they don't have a place to go, with all due respect to Rosa, and I really hope the banks is the opportunity for everybody. But I did want to also mention that I think that come the summer, it's going to be incredibly hot, talking about the trees, and an opportunity that might arise, and I don't know how we would do this, is for consideration, are these sails that I've seen. They're like canopies, and they would really be reminiscent of tall ships in the seaport. So I don't know if that's something that could be considered, or if there's any opportunity for forward thinking on the park for shade, because I think that thing's going to sizzle this summer. But I love it, and thank you so much. I go there every morning before I drop off my kids to school.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. As far as, any future development on the park, like shade structures, and I can see that could be a possibility in the future. It's not funded as part of this, so it would have to be, something that comes up for future. I know we've looked into shade, like umbrella tables and chairs that can be possibly installed, but that, again, that would not be part of this capital project. That would have to come.
Ricardo, may I share with you a design that I saw that's worked in like Australia and some super other sunny places, just so you can see what I was talking about? Is that an opportunity for a meeting?
Sure.
Great.
You want to, want my email?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll type it in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I think we've covered all the speakers that I see. So thank you, Ricardo. You've been great, and Parks has been great. You've been very responsive. I hope we could close out these ticket items that need to get done, but otherwise the park is a great addition to the community and we appreciate it. And thank you, thanks Steve Simon, etc. for
Great, thank
everything.
you. And it heartens us that everybody's loving it, and we'll work on what we can in terms of improving it and making, checking off those issues.
Okay, thank you again, and you have a good evening unless you have anything else you need to add. I guess you're done.
I'm done. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Okay, so committee, we have one last item to cover, which is item 5, African Burial Ground International Memorial Museum and Educational Center Act. I am going to ask Diana to handle this item and walk us through it.
Yeah, I admit that I'm not an expert on this legislation, and this came to us kind of shortly before this meeting, and that's why it was added last minute. Generally speaking, I think the idea is to share news of this announcement. We're still in the process of collecting more information. We had a short discussion with Nadler's office at the very end of last week, which was positive. Like I said, we're continuing to learn more. So, I think next steps would be connecting with the African Burial Ground and some other interested stakeholders to continue this discussion. And as we find out more about how this exactly will manifest, I've shared here the release, and there's a link to the bill text itself at the end of this, and I circulated that to the committee earlier. I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights. This is from Nadler's office, and this is the press release for the announcement of the reintroduction of the African Burial Ground International Memorial Museum and Education Center Act, which would establish a museum and education center at the African Burial Ground in Lower Manhattan. The museum would be managed by the National Park Service in consultation with the African Burial Ground Advisory Council, which would be established by the legislation. And the museum would serve as a sister site to the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And after all of these quotes from lots of elected officials in support, there's a little blurb here, which I think is of particular interest, in that the museum would host complementary exhibits and foster collaboration with the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., as well as other museums, historically Black colleges and universities, historical societies and educational institutions, creating a stronger network of groups focused on strengthening our understanding of slavery and its lasting impact on our history. So that's some of the general information that we have now. Like I said, this is still unfolding and we're still discovering what the exact next steps are, but there is a resolution for us to consider this evening, the intent of which I believe is to state our general support. The African Burial Ground obviously is a very significant cultural institution in Lower Manhattan, one that perhaps has been overlooked for some time, and any opportunity to, infuse resources and attention. I think that collaboration and having it folded into a federal institution is of particular importance. So I think getting a stake in the ground to state our support, and also in the resolution notes the desire to incorporate the South Street Seaport Museum, which is an important component to telling the story of Africans and early African Americans in colonial history. So I'll leave it there. I circulated this earlier. Like I said, I know this is last minute. I just want to turn it over to Tammy for a second because we both spoke to Nadler's office at the end of last week. So I want to make sure if she has anything to add that she has an opportunity to do that.
Thanks, Diana. I would like to actually, as long as we're working through this, separate out the therefore be it resolves into two separate ones to indicate that we do support the legislation, and that we would also furthermore like to find ways to connect the South Street Seaport Museum I will say that because the Seaport Museum is not, on that same level as the other two museums in terms of National Park Service and nationally, then it is much more difficult to link them. But there is no reason that they couldn't be, it couldn't be a discussion that we ask for. But I do want to have it to be two separate asks. And at a base minimum, help support the museum with the concept of being connected with the burial grounds. That's my one comment.
Okay. I think that should be acceptable to all. Thank you, Tammy, for working on this, and Diana. This, oh, we do have a few hands up. Okay, so let's go to them. I thought we could do this one really fast. Okay, let's go to, I'll go in order. Richard Corman.
Yeah, thanks. Tammy just spoke to the question that I had, which was the connection and the linkage to the South Street Seaport Museum. I think we have to be really careful that we don't create a situation where pending legislation that could create a really important cultural location and cultural place for us downtown in a very important way would be slowed up in any way, or our support would be minimized or diminished in any way by connecting this to the South Street Seaport. And also, is the Seaport interested in doing this, and are they capable of being connected in some way? How is this going to work with them?
Interesting that you have that question. I had the same question, and I did ask it after my conversation with Nather's office on Friday, and had a very nice conversation with Jonathan Bulware. Certainly, the partnership and the programming is something that they're very interested in, but he couldn't answer me on the other. The reason my thought process for separating out the two, therefore, whereas is we do resolve rather is that we don't want to diminish our support for this amazing institution for the burial grounds by linking the two and having it be we only support it if. I think it's a further be it resolved that we would like to be able to have it if it works out. So much to your point.
Yeah, in that context, sure. But it shouldn't in any way diminish our support for this legislation. Agree with you, Tammy.
Agreed. That's why I think it needs to be separated.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would actually probably make sure that there is only one mention of the whereas for the South Street Seaport Museum, and therefore only one mention in the therefore be it resolved to talk about the potential connection.
Okay. Alice?
Yeah, I was actually, those are exactly the points I was going to raise. I didn't get to talk to you, Tammy, about this. Is the idea here, when you say incorporated, what exactly do you mean that the museum, could you just describe what you mean by that?
I don't think the word should be incorporated. I think it should be a partner. Because if incorporated means to take over, and we don't have the position to understand if that's possible or what that is. Me personally, but again, it's up to the committee. This is not a done deal. This is not where we're saying, this is not a resolution we passed. This is working through committee. If it was me, I would call it partnerships, and I would not call it incorporated.
Good. Okay, so that's one question solved. And then the first one maybe is to just reiterate to Richard's point. I don't think it's serving as a mechanism to deliver more funding and resources to the burial ground. Not at all. It's doing, and I would just frankly lift what Nadler's description states, which is, what is it? The African Burial Ground International Memorial Museum and Education Center would establish a world-class museum as well as an educational and research center on the site of the burial ground where the remains of 15,000 Africans are interred. I mean, I would just I don't think it's a mechanism to deliver funding. We're supporting the museum and what it's looking to do. So I would just probably identify that, as a world-class museum and educational research center on the site of the burial ground.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a few edits as we go here to capture those comments.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Michael Kramer.
I think that the way to involve the museum is to talk about the slave ships, because everybody who we're describing came in on a ship, and they came in at the seaport. And there's a great story that the Seaport Museum could tell about that journey from, Ghana and other places to New York. So I think that might be, to talk about the story of the slave ships really does tie in the museum.
Okay. Maybe we could add a reference there, or maybe whatever. Okay, Justine. Justine, you need to unmute.
Oh, sorry, Justine, you must have gotten booted out and came back in. I'll unmute you and I'll move you back in as panelist.
Thank you. Yep, that's exactly what happened. I guess, thank you. Sorry, I got bumped off and now I'm back on. I guess I apologize because I got bumped off and I missed the beginning piece of it. I don't understand, and I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, but I don't understand why we're putting the South Street Seaport Museum in the same resolution with the African burial ground. Did Nadler's legislation do that, or is this something that we're doing? Because I have a couple of questions.
Tammy, do you want to comment on that? It's not part of Nadler's legislation.
Okay.
It's not part of Nadler's. We don't have to include it. We're including it just to be able to call it out for partnership, not for inclusion. I think that might have been a part you missed because we're not talking about incorporating. We're talking about potential partnerships. That's all.
Okay. I don't know that it's our place to do that. I don't know that. I guess I would love to hear from people on the board who are not. Well, I'd love to hear from people on the board who are African American, and hear what they have to say, and hear from people in the community who are, because off the top of my head, it's sort of, I've never seen the South Street Seaport Museum as a place that has explored or put forth any of the Black history and the slavery and what Lower Manhattan is in that regard. I don't think they ever saw that as their mission. It is a piece of history. Maybe it's mentioned, maybe it's not, but it's not showcased. Whereas the African Burial Museum is dedicated to recognizing and acknowledging what happened there. So I guess I just have a problem with it because I think it's like insensitive at the very least, and maybe worse. Not in any way, shape, or form being not supportive of the Seaport Museum or not supportive of the African burial ground, but I don't think we have a business of inflating it. Do two resolutions or conflating them. That's the word I'm trying to say. That's what I would suggest, and I'm sorry, but I'm sorry if I missed stuff. Thank you.
I don't mind that at all. It's up to the committee, whatever the committee decides.
I think Justine's idea is a strong one. I think the Seaport Museum is distinct. I mean, but there might be some way to, I just don't know if this had something to do, that's why I asked about funding in some way, federal funding, but if not, then I think that the programming at the South Street Seaport Museum is a different issue. But I get where you're going with this, Tammy, but I think, you want to make it clear whether there's a funding aspect to it.
Because I would agree with that, because if Nadler's legislation conflated the two, then yeah, that's totally, it makes sense. Without that, I don't see that they make sense together. Thank you.
Okay, let's see who's left that hasn't been heard. I don't know. Do we have anyone left, Diana?
I think we got through everybody from the committee, and a reminder, if you're done asking your questions, to put your hands down so we know who's left. We do have a handful of folks from the public, though.
Okay.
Okay, the first of which is Taylor Banning. Go ahead, Taylor.
Hi, thank you. Taylor Banning. I live in Barry Park City, grew up here. I just I guess I second, I guess what a couple comments, some of the comments that have already been said by Justine and Richard. I guess the first question is, what did the African burial ground have to say about it? You know, I'm curious how they see us and what they want the community board to do and support, or if it's in their interest for us to put something forth in this way, whether it be partner, whatever word we use with the Seaport. So curious what their voice, what they had to say on this and what they asked us for. That I'm honestly, I don't, do they not know about it?
The conversations were with Nadler on Nadler's legislation. And it was a conversation about potential partner programming and having the history be told across connecting all of Lower Manhattan, which is a dialogue we've had before on this board. Again, the resolution is about the legislation. So we don't need to do anything other than pass a resolution if we want that just supports the legislation.
Okay, I just heard you mention you had spoken to the
team.
Seaport Museum, and you had taken the time to have a conversation with the president, who I love, I've spoken to him too, and who's committed to addressing systemic racism going forward. But I do agree that I haven't seen that museum address racism systemically, talk about, you know, the productive component of it and how beneficial the white violence there. And the African burial ground is literally a site. It's a burial ground. As the bill, as you say, the legislation states very clearly of over 15,000 Black Americans. So I don't know, I guess I'm curious why maybe it's worth talking to the African burial ground and asking how they would view that partnership as well and getting their input as well. I know this happened really quickly, but it sounds like their voice is kind of critical for this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, is Jacob Morris next?
That would be me. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. So I would hazard a guess that most of the members of the committee are not so young that they don't remember the movie Amistad by Steven Spielberg. Let me point out that the translator for the mutineers, for the blacks who were the insurrectionists on the Amistad, was found on the docks near where the seaport is. Has the Seaport Museum ever done any programming? And by the way, I have to point out that 40% of the sailors prior to the Civil War in the United States were Black. And that a big part of the uproar in the South prior to the Civil War about the dissemination of abolitionist literature to Blacks in the South by Black sailors that caused the Southern seaport authorities in multiple cities like Charleston, South Carolina, and so on, barred ships from the north from docking, and the sailors, the Black sailors, had to be confined to the ships so that they wouldn't bring abolitionist literature into the South. There's so much potential programming that the Seaport Museum could do that would be complementary and synergistic with what the African Burial Ground Memorial does, and it would be to the benefit of both. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'm hoping that this excellent committee will come up with something that'll build on what I just said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Megan Malvern.
Hi, everybody. I'm very mouthy tonight. I'm sorry. I just want to point out to Taylor and Justine the reason why there isn't a natural nexus between the South Street Seaport Museum and the African burial is because it's been suppressed. It is an obvious connection between the history of Lower Manhattan and the people who were forcibly brought here. So I think the only reason why Nadler didn't have it originally in their legislation is because it has been suppressed for decades through the South Street Seaport Museum, which was just totally explained by the speaker before me. So I absolutely disagree with Taylor and Justine's summation that it is tying something onto it that is not relevant. It is
No, you missed the point. It wasn't that it wasn't relevant.
Let her finish.
It is wholly and completely connected to the story of the African burial ground. And I think it's strange that you would otherwise suggest.
Paul, if I may, I agree with what you're saying. It is wholly connected. The problem is it hasn't been raised before. That's why I'm saying it shouldn't be raised now and connected.
That's our job as the community board and the people who live here, is to show and talk about connections that are overlooked.
Exactly. I don't think this resolution does that, but I agree with you 100%. And I think that we need to do it separately. But I agree with everything that you said and the person who went before you. I think that makes sense, but okay, sorry.
Let's
yeah,
just hear from the remaining speakers. Betty Kay.
Thanks. I just want to take a more pragmatic approach. I don't think that trying to partner a park service that's related to the Smithsonian, Institutes of Smithsonian, with a local museum that has never worked to that kind of level belongs in something that its real intent is to support some federal legislation. I say just separate the two, do this supporting the federal legislation, which would be a great boon to our district and just in general, I think would be great. Have a separate resolution at another time, because that's the whole task of what we'd like to see the seaport to do, to bring their whole role into it. And I agree, that's all very important things that should be brought into our district, but it doesn't belong here. This should focus on the positive, and that's Nadler's legislation and what it would do for us. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
And for the record, I agree with Betty.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think that that is not contradictory to what was said by the two speakers.
Okay. David, do you still want to speak? Wait, we can't hear you. Oh, you're ready to move on. All right. So do we want to strike the second, the be it further resolved? Is that the consensus that I'm hearing? And possibly put it into a separate resolution or something along those lines. Okay?
Can I just say one thing, Paul? Sorry.
Who's this?
This is Michael.
Okay.
Okay. In 1998, the South Street Seaport Museum was designated by Congress as America's National Maritime Museum. So there is a nexus there.
That makes sense. That's good to know. That's not the point of my objection. I think that we can make a separate resolution right now or next month if nobody wants to keep doing this at 10 o'clock at night almost.
Right. But the whole point of the slave trade, it was financed by Wall Street.
Yes.
And between, the financing and the insurance companies and the slave ships, you have a real nexus there for the seaport.
You do. And I think that part of our resolution, whether it comes out of this committee or the Quality of Life Committee or wherever it comes from, needs to say this is the history, and the South Street Seaport needs to get going to highlight this history, because that happened right there.
Believe me, we've said that to Boulware.
And well, maybe we need this committee and this board to step up and say that this is what it needs to do, because it's part of the history.
Paul, I make a motion to call the question with the revised changes.
I second that motion.
Okay, Diana,
All right.
you
I
put
think
me
there's a
down
pretty
for
wide
yes.
consensus striking that second, therefore. So I'm going to call for any objections, abstaining, or recused. Are there any objecting? Any abstaining? Any recused? Great. It's unanimous. Thanks so much, everybody.
So
All right, so why don't
I would
we,
just like to say, Paul, just to get a final word in here, I certainly vote yes for this because this is a truly important institution for us. But I do think we should come back and find a way to put a resolution together that encourages these two institutions to work together to tell the story of the importance of the slave trade and the Black community in our history as it relates to both the seaport as well as Lower Manhattan. I think that's an important thing for us to do.
we could try to get to that next month at the May meeting.
Right, but I just want to put that out there to be
No,
sure
I
we do it.
agree as well. I think that's the reason that it was originally put in this one, but okay, we'll put it in a separate one. Okay, any new old business? All right, thank you for hanging in there till close to 10 o'clock. And we will see you all at a meeting soon.
Thank you, Paul. Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
guys,
you
for this
all.
great meeting.
Great
Good
job, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Tim.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.